Chapter 1092, Revenge. Chapter 1092, Revenge. With the departure of the Blue Dragon Elder and Long Yang, the dragons gradually dispersed as well. Before long she left. She even turned to look at Su Zimo with a complicated expression. Of course, there were still many dragons surrounding Su Zimo in the Dragon Blood battlefield that refused to leave. Most of them were Illumination dragons. This battle boosted the morale of the Illumination dragon lineage. Long Yang's defeat meant that Su Zimo would become the new number one of the hidden dragon ranking. This was the first time in history that an Illumination dragon had ascended to the top of the hidden dragon ranking. Some of the Illumination dragons who did not acknowledge Su Zimo initially had no objections now, afraid that he would not join the Illumination dragon lineage. "You guys can leave first." Right then, the 4 dragon elders descended from midair and said to the surrounding dragons, "Longimo, stay here." Illumination Dragon Elder 4 smiled at Su Zimo with a gentle expression. The dragons left. Su Zimo and the 4 dragon elders were the only ones left in the Dragon Blood battlefield. "Longimo, that dermic art you released earlier on, the one with the gray mist, what is it called?" The Horned Dragon Elder asked. "Baron." Su Zimo did not choose to hide the truth. "Release it again and we'll take a look." The Winged Dragon Elder was curious. Or rather, he could not believe that the power of a Void Reversion Dragon's dermic art could affect an existence of their level. Su Zimo flipped his palm and a gray fog appeared. At this distance, the 4 dragon elders could feel it even more clearly. The Winged Dragon Elder extended a finger and tapped the gray fog gently. The moment his finger touched the gray fog, it retracted. "Pissed?" He gasped and nodded at the other 3 dragon elders. True enough, the power of that dermic art could even affect them. Earlier on, the Winged Dragon Elder merely took a single touch and retracted it. At most, it was a tenth of a breath's time, and he lost dozens of years of his lifespan. Furthermore, it was irreversible and irrecoverable. His lifespan of dozens of years was completely gone. "Hurry and put it away," the Winged Dragon Elder urged. For some reason, he felt his heart skip a beat as he looked at the gray fog. "Where did you learn this dermic art?" the Horned Dragon Elder asked. Su Zimo replied indifferently, "A friend taught me." "Can you impart this dermic art?" The eyes of the Horned Dragon Elder shone as he could not help but ask. Even though they had already become elders of the dragon race and were of noble status with torrential combat strength that could even fight against Mahayana patriarchs, they were still tempted when they saw such dermic arts. "Sorry, I can't." Su Zimo shook his head without hesitation. Dai Yu had once told him that he could not impart the mystic classic of the 12 demon kings of the great wilderness to outsiders. Su Zimo had never forgotten Dai Yu's words. A look of regret appeared on the faces of the Horned and Winged Dragon Elders. Only Illumination Dragon Elder 4 had a calm expression as he nodded towards Su Zimo, as though he understood the latter's intentions. The Horned Dragon Elder retracted a momentary flash of heat in his eyes and said with a sullen expression, "Long Imo, as someone of the dragon race, you cultivate our cultivation techniques and enjoyed the use of the primordial divine spring. You should hand this dermic art over." Su Zimo frowned. He felt disgusted. This was clearly trying to blackmail him through goodwill. The primordial divine spring had indeed saved his life and revived his true body of the dragon race. However, he had also joined the dragon race. If they were to request anything from him because of this, he would only feel disgusted. Given Su Zimo's character, he would rather not have the true body of the dragon race than submit. There were some things that triggered his bottom line which he could not compromise. No way. This time round, Su Zimo rejected even more thoroughly and his tone turned colder. The Horned Dragon Elder narrowed his eyes. A Void Reversion Junior of the dragon race dared to reject him and speak to him in that tone. Furthermore, this junior was an outsider with an impure bloodline and an unknown identity. "Junior, say that again," the Horned Dragon Elder said with a dark gaze. "Long Zhong, what are you doing?" Illumination Dragon Elder 4 pulled Su Zimo behind him. The gentleness on his face disappeared as he glared at the horned dragon elder with a sharp gaze. This dermic art is extremely powerful. If he were to hand it over to us, the strength of our dragon race would increase. That's not overboard. The horned dragon elder called Long Zhong said indifferently. Illumination dragon elder, 4 harumphed coldly. If that child is willing, that's naturally for the best. However, if he's unwilling, no one can force him. Not you, me, or any other dragon. Su Zimo was touched when he heard that. No matter what, the elders of the Illumination dragon lineage did not treat him as an outsider and were always protecting him. Why are you so protective of him? Long Zhong frowned slightly and asked in a deep voice. Illumination dragon elder 4 sneered. This has nothing to do with being protective. Long Zhong, don't you feel shameless forcing a junior to hand over his cultivation technique, given your age? You. Long Zhong was speechless, and his expression darkened completely. The hornless dragon elder was a middle-aged beauty. At that moment, she shook her head as well. Long Zhong, you've truly gone overboard in this matter. Although I want to cultivate this dermic art as well, I won't force this child. All right, everyone, stop arguing. The winged dragon elder stood out and tried to smooth things over. Long Zhong might have sounded tough because he was anxious. He has no ill intentions. It better be. Illumination Dragon Elder 4 said, the Illumination Dragon lineage has already decided that Long Imo will be the young master of the Illumination Dragon lineage and will be given the title of Illumination. Some old fogies should not have any designs on him. Humph. Long Zhong could not hold it in any longer. He flicked his sleeves and left, disappearing quickly. It's fine, ignore him. Illumination Dragon Elder 4 turned around and patted Su Zimo on the shoulder. That fellow must be old and muddle-headed. Thank you, Elder 4. Su Zimo bowed in thanks. This time round, it was all thanks to Illumination Dragon Elder 4 who helped him out. Otherwise, given his personality, there was a high chance that he would end up in a tragic state if he were to get into an argument with the horned dragon elder, and his true body of the dragon race would be crippled once more. Right, that essence spirit secret skill of yours was also given to you by your friend? The hornless dragon elder asked curiously. Yes. Su Zimo nodded. What's the name of the essence spirit secret skill? The hornless dragon elder asked again. Reverse scale. When they heard that word, the 3 elders were slightly stunned before realization flashed through their eyes. Reverse scale, reverse scale. Anyone who touches it will die. The winged dragon elder murmured and nodded. No wonder it's so domineering. Illumination Dragon Elder 4 pondered for a moment before reminding, Long Imo, that barren dermic art and reverse scale secret skill are way too, a little strong. Try not to use them if you fight with other dragons in the Dragon Bone Valley in the future. Chapter 1093, Returning to the North Region. Chapter 1093, Returning to the North Region, Dragon Bone Valley. Less than a month after the battle between Su Zimo and Long Yang, the elders of the Illumination Dragon lineage stepped in and conferred Su Zimo the title of the young master of the Illumination Dragon lineage, as well as the name Long Zhu. After another half a year, Su Zimo had completely integrated into Dragon Bone Valley. Firstly, the battle half a year ago made him famous among the dragon race and gained the recognition of many of them, especially the Illumination Dragon lineage. Secondly, the young master of the Illumination Dragon lineage had a noble status far above the other dragons. Thirdly, Su Zimo had already become the number 1 of the hidden dragon ranking. Furthermore, Long Yang, who was already ranked 2nd on the hidden dragon ranking, did not become hostile towards Su Zimo after his defeat. Instead, he became extremely close to the latter. Whenever someone wanted to challenge Su Zimo, Long Yang would take the initiative to stop them. For the past half a year, all the dragons that fought Long Yang were defeated. If they could not even defeat the 2nd on the hidden dragon ranking, there was no way they could challenge the top of the hidden dragon ranking. Long Yang was not the only one. Long Shi of the hornless dragon race often ran towards the Illumination Dragon lineage as well. Furthermore, she had changed from her violent temper to become much gentler, causing the dragons to click their tongues in envy. However, Su Zimo still could not take it. Even if this body was the true body of the dragon race, he had no intention of becoming the Tao companion of a dragon. He was also unwilling to agree to the marriage alliance that the Illumination Dragon Elders urged him to. He was so frustrated that he decided to enter seclusion. In the blink of an eye, 10 years had passed. Bottom of the Dragon Burial Valley. Early in the morning, the sun rose and shone on a black-haired cultivator in the ancient temple. Su Zimo opened his eyes slowly and exhaled deeply. 10 years ago, he had just entered the void reversion realm and reconstructed his body. 10 years later, he was already at the peak of the void reversion realm. That cultivation speed could be said to be rather terrifying. The higher one's cultivation realm was, the more difficult it was to raise it. Back in the nascent soul realm, Su Zimo spent a full 100 years to cultivate from early stage to peak mid-stage nascent soul realm. However, at the void reversion realm, this process only took 10 years. At the nascent soul realm, apart from his cultivation, Su Zimo had to nurture the creation green lotus continuously. But now, the creation green lotus had already vanished, and there was only a bare lotus platform and 54 green lotus seeds left. There was no longer a need for an essence spirit to nurture them. Because of that, Su Zimo's cultivation speed increased tremendously. Secondly, when he was at the nascent soul realm, he cultivated the top cultivation techniques of the immortal and Buddhist sections. At the void reversion realm, he cultivated the top cultivation techniques of the immortal, Buddhist, and fiend sects. The cultivation technique of the fiend sects even came from a half-martial ancestor of the fiend sections. There was no need for Su Zimo to comprehend the insights and understanding of the Tao Heart Fiend Seed Sutra personally. After devouring the memories of the half-martial ancestor of the fiend sects, it was as though he was enlightened. He could comprehend the essence and profoundness of this fiend technique right away. With that, he had already cultivated to the peak of the mid-stage void reversion realm after 10 years. He had been in this realm for a month now. Su Zimo could vaguely sense a bottleneck. If he continued to cultivate in seclusion at the bottom of the Dragon Burial Valley, he might not be able to break through this bottleneck even if he spent another 10 years or dozens of years. Furthermore, he was in deep thought, and now that he had returned to the North region, it was a good time to visit some of his old friends. After bidding farewell to Monk Yuan Bei and the red-headed ghost, Su Zimo left Dragon Burial Valley and headed towards the capital of Great Zhou. This time round, he no longer had to hide after returning to the North region. The impact of the battle at the Dao Inheritance Ground was immense. Later on, the D clan half-martial ancestor was severely injured and a mighty figure of Chaos Essence sect died. The fact that a few conjoint body mighty figures of a few super sects were defeated in the Dragon Burial Valley had an even greater impact on the cultivation world. At the very least, none of the sects dared to target him under the guise of killing someone from an alien race. There was no Dharma characteristic Tao Lord or conjoint body mighty figure that would dare to attack him recklessly given their difference in major cultivation realms. This was excluding fights between peers of the same cultivation realm. Of course, in the eyes of many cultivators, Su Zimo had already fallen from grace. Without the divine phoenix bone, his body and the creation green lotus, Su Zimo was not even a paragon in the eyes of the cultivators. Even if he could return alive, he would fade into the masses and become insignificant. At that moment, no one realized that the monster incarnate that once caused countless paragons to tremble in fear had already been reborn. After entering the territory of Great Zhou, Su Zimo was in no hurry. He continued forward and surveyed the mountains and rivers. All these years, under Ji Yaoshua's governance, Great Zhou was even more prosperous than before. The country was strong, and the citizens lived in peace. More than 100 years ago, the allied army of Great Shang, Great Xia and Great Yu invaded Great Zhou and was buried by Su Zimo in Songlang mountain range. After that battle, the fate of Great Zhou flourished. Su Zimo was happy for Ji Yaoshua as well. Although they were fated, they were not on the same path. As the Empress of Great Zhou, Ji Yaoxuan naturally wanted to establish a strong dynasty and welcome a peaceful era. However, Su Zimo had to continue cultivating and pursue that illusory great Tao to catch up to Dai Yu. Even so, Ji Yaoxue held an extremely important position in Su Zimo's heart. He could not forget how Ji Yaoxue looked at him without any contempt before he condensed his qi. He could not forget the Sky Treasure badge given to him by Ji Yaoxue. More than that, he could not forget that 100 years ago, there was a woman who braved danger every year to come to Dragon Burial Valley to vent her emotions. If not for Ji Yaoxue, he would not even be able to see Su Hong for the last time. Su Hong was his older brother. Back then, Glass Palace chased after him. Nobody dared to get involved with him or take in Su Hong. Only Ji Yaoxue risked her life to bring Su Hong out and hid him in the capital of Great Zhou for 20 years. Su Zimo remembered all of that friendship. He might not end up with Ji Yaoxue in this lifetime. However, as long as he was alive, he would ensure her safety for the rest of her life. Before long, Su Zimo suddenly stopped in his tracks. Not far away, there was a layer of dark clouds in the skies. It was formed from extremely heavy grievances that lingered without dissipating. Su Zimo moved and rushed over. Before long, he arrived. It was a medium-sized village with about 40 families. At that moment, corpses were strewn everywhere in the village. Every single corpse was rotten and filled with poisonous boils. There was a huge hole in their abdomen, and the blood that flowed had long dried up. All the corpses had widened eyes and died with grievances. Their deaths were tragic and shocking. All of the blood was black. Frowning slightly, Su Zimo released his spirit consciousness and enveloped the entire village. There were more than 100 people in the village. Be it men, women, old or young. All of them were dead without a single survivor. All of them died in similar states. Poison boils grew on their bodies, and their blood turned black. There was a huge hole in their abdomens, as though they were ripped apart by something. It did not seem like it was done by any demon beast. However, Su Zimo could not sense any aura left behind by cultivators from these mortals. These mortals died in a strange manner. Su Zimo's expression was dark. This was something that happened in the mortal world and had nothing to do with him. However, when he saw these unarmed mortals encounter such a calamity, he could not help but recall the calamity that the citizens of the country of Yin had suffered. This scene strengthened his determination to establish his Tao. Chapter 1094, Black Rain. Chapter 1094, Black Rain. 3 gigantic spirit vessels flew in the skies above the territory of Great Zhou. Each spirit vessel had close to 100 cultivators with powerful auras and exuded a mighty pressure. Among them, there were more than 10 void reversions on each spirit vessel, and the rest were nascent souls. No matter where it was, this was a force that could not be ignored. The 3 spirit vessels were majestic, and each of them had a gigantic flag with the words Great Xia, Great Shang, and Great Yu written on it. On the spirit vessel in the middle, 3 cultivators stood side by side with a dignified and incomparably noble expression. It was clear that they were people who had been in power for a long time. If any cultivator in the capital of Great Zhou saw the 3 of them, they would definitely be shocked. These 3 cultivators were the emperors of Great Xia, Great Shang, and Great Yu dynasties. The emperors of the 3 dynasties personally arrived in the territory of Great Zhou. This piece of land is truly not bad. It's filled with talents and blessings. Suddenly, a playful voice sounded from behind the 3 emperors. The 3 emperors shuddered and immediately moved to make way. A green-robed cultivator strode over. He was at the void reversion realm, and his lips curled into a sinister smile as he advanced to the bow of the ship slowly. Initially, the 3 emperors were dignified. However, when they saw this person, they lowered their heads slightly and greeted respectfully, "Master." Standing against the wind, the green-robed cultivator passed by a bustling city and looked down at the dense crowd of mortals beneath him. A ferocious glint flashed through his eyes as he gently removed his sleeves. Pieces of black light rained down on the ground. Go, go! The green-robed cultivator smiled gently and murmured, "I know you guys are hungry. Go and eat those ants and enjoy yourselves." In the city, the pedestrians walking on the streets felt their faces wet and touched instinctively. Their fingers were stained with a black liquid that resembled ink. "What's that? Is that black rain?" A pedestrian hurried by, wiping his cheeks and muttering. Nobody cared. Nobody noticed the 3 spirit vessels shuttling through the clouds above the city. On the spirit vessel, the 3 emperors looked at the black spots of light spilling from the green-robed young man's sleeves with a hint of fear in their eyes. "Master, don't worry. The territory of Great Zhou will be under your control soon." With a humble expression, the Emperor of Great Xia gave a somewhat obsequious laugh. The Emperor of Great Shang said in a low voice, "Master, the Patriarch of Great Zhou died after his lifespan was depleted. Without a Dharma characteristic Tao Lord in the Great Zhou dynasty, the few of us are enough to occupy the capital of Great Zhou. However, I heard that the number 1 sect in the territory of Great Zhou, Ethereal Peak, has a Dharma characteristic demon beast. This? Fu-Fu." The green-robed young man chuckled. "What are you afraid of? That beast can't even protect itself. My master has already brought his men over." "Master is wise." The 3 emperors hurriedly flattered. "Fellow Taoist, don't worry. Elder son of the Dragon Tiger sect has already arrived in the capital of Great Zhou. Even if there's a Dharma characteristic Tao Lord, he won't be a match for Elder Son." A strong void reversion stood out and looked at the green-robed young man respectfully. With a Tao Lord from one of the 10 upper sects of the North region, Dragon Tiger sect, nothing will go wrong. The green-robed young man's gaze landed on the Tao being of Dragon Tiger sect as he smiled and asked, "Tao being Red Tiger, how's the power of the golden silkworm?" When he heard that, Tao being Red Tiger's gaze suddenly turned fervent as he grinned. "It feels great. My combat strength has at least doubled. Thank you for granting me that." "Haha." The green-robed young man raised his head and smiled, the mockery in his eyes fleeting. Su Zimo lingered in the village filled with corpses for a long time, but did not find any clues. Those mortals died tragically, and the black blood in their bodies seemed to be poisoned. However, there was a huge hole in the abdomen of those mortals, as though they were ripped apart by some demon beast. However, he did not discover any demonic chi around the village. Without any clue, Su Zimo set the corpses on fire to prevent a plague from spreading before continuing on towards the capital of Great Zhou. A day later, there was a city not far ahead with an aura of death surrounding it. A series of tragic wails could be heard from within the city. Frowning, Su Zimo sped forward and arrived above the city before long. When he looked down, he could not help but gasp. The city was strewn with corpses. Every single corpse had poisonous boils and a bloody hole in their abdomen that was oozing with black blood. They were exactly the same as the mortals who died in the village previously. There were hundreds of thousands of mortals, and none were spared. Some of them were not dead and were still struggling on the spot. Their consciousnesses were already blurry, and they seemed to be enduring endless pain as they rolled and wailed on the ground. In a flash, Su Zimo arrived beside one of them. He scanned with his spirit consciousness and realized that there was a wisp of spirit chi in that person's body. This was also a chi refinement warrior, but his cultivation realm was low. If not for that wisp of spirit chi, he might not have been able to survive till now. Su Zimo hurriedly took out a few bottles of elixirs from his storage bag and stuffed them into the mouths of one of them without any explanation. Those elixirs were perfect-grade elixirs that could cure all poisons. However, the person's condition did not improve at all after consuming the elixirs. He continued screaming in pain. Su Zimo was helpless against such a situation as well. How could this be? Su Zimo swayed the person's body and asked in a deep voice, "What happened?" Perhaps the elixirs had some effect on him as he regained consciousness and murmured, "Black rain, black rain, black rain?" Su Zimo frowned. Right then, he swept his gaze across the person's abdomen. His clothes were already torn and a fist-sized blood bubble protruded from his exposed abdomen. Immediately after, the blood bubble burst. A black thing that resembled a snake's head burrowed out. It was the length of an arm and had no nose, eyes, or ears. However, it had a menacing mouth that could tear flesh and was filled with sharp fangs. Scree! The demon beast shrieked and tore through the person's abdomen. As though it sensed something, it suddenly turned around, opened its mouth, and charged towards Suzimo with its scarlet tongue. Evil creature! A cold glint flashed through Suzimo's eyes and a scarlet flame appeared on his fingertip, engulfing the black demon beast instantly. Enveloped by the immortal Tao fire, the demon beast turned into ashes instantly without a single sound. He had never seen such a demon beast before. In fact, he could not sense any demonic chi from the demon beast at all. Suzimo's expression was dark. This was clearly not a natural disaster and was most likely a man-made disaster. The lives of these mortals had nothing to do with him. However, such inhumane and cruel methods still caused a strong killing intent to surge within him. Apart from Dean, he had not felt such killing intent for a long time. Chapter 1095, 3 Dynasties Paying Respects. Chapter 1095, 3 Dynasties Paying Respects. Suzimo was silent as he looked at those who were still struggling and screaming. Although his combat strength was strong, and he was once the most terrifying monster incarnate in Tianhuang mainland, he was helpless against this scene. These people could no longer be saved. The only thing he could do was to end their suffering. Poof, poof, poof. Suzimo flicked his finger gently and released dermic powers, killing the mortals who were in so much pain that they wanted to die. Thereafter, he released the immortal Tao fire and burned the entire city to ashes. Suzimo moved and continued forward. Before long, his gaze shifted and he saw a group of cultivators speeding ahead, seemingly discussing something. Have you heard? The patriarch of Great Zhou has passed away from old age. The Dharma characteristic Tao Lord that established the Great Zhou dynasty? That's him. To think that he would live for so long before dying. I heard that if not for the patriarch presiding over the capital of Great Zhou would have been annexed by the other 3 dynasties. Suzimo's ears quivered, and he heard everything that the cultivators were discussing. He frowned slightly with a hint of doubt in his eyes. He had heard of the patriarch of the Great Zhou dynasty. Back then, Nian Shi and Little Crane Qing Qing were able to enter the intermediate ancient battlefield because the old immortal Crane and the patriarch of Great Zhou worked together to open up the spatial node. This old ancestor was already in his twilight years and had yet to break through. It was only logical that his lifespan was exhausted. Suzimo was puzzled. This should have been an extremely secretive matter. How did everyone know about it? If the 3 dynasties were to hear of this, it would be disadvantageous for Great Zhou. Suzimo did not think further. A pair of dermic power wings appeared on his back and lightning coiled around his body. He turned into a bolt of purple lightning and overtook the cultivators instantly, disappearing into the void. The capital of Great Zhou. The palace was cold and empty. A woman in a pale yellow robe with long black hair that cascaded down like a waterfall had an extremely beautiful face. Although she was not wearing any makeup or pearls, she had a dignified aura. The woman rubbed her forehead gently and leaned against the back of the chair. Her eyes were closed, and there was a deep fatigue between her brows as though she was taking a nap. A middle-aged man walked in from outside the hall and sighed gently as he looked at the sleeping woman. During this period of time, the patriarch had passed away and the pillar of the dynasty had collapsed. All the burden was on this woman. That was because she was the current empress of Great Zhou, Ji Yaoxue. Even a 7-foot-tall man like him could not withstand the pressure, let alone a weak woman. For some reason, news of the patriarch's death had spread over the past few days, causing the entire Great Zhou to be in turmoil. After hesitating for a long time, the middle-aged man said softly, "Empress, the kings have arrived at the capital to pay their respects." "Yes?" Ji Yaoxue jolted awake from her dream and let out a long breath before nodding. "Uncle Mingze, it's been hard on you." "It's nothing." That middle-aged man was perfected Lord Mingzhe, who had once followed the emperor. Right now, he had already cultivated to the void reversion realm. Ji Yaoshue walked out. She was the one who wanted the kings to pay their respects. Since the news of the patriarch's death had already been leaked, she might as well take advantage of the situation and gather the kings of the great Zhou vassal states here to teach them a lesson. The two of them headed towards the depths of the palace where the patriarch of Great Zhou was buried. The kings had arrived as well. Right then, a beautiful figure sped over with an extremely fast and anxious expression. It was the former commander of the White Hawk Guards and one of the current commanders of the Imperial Army, Bai Yuhan. After more than 100 years, Bai Yuhan had also cultivated to the nascent soul realm. Yuhan, what's wrong? Something major must have happened for Bai Yuhan to be in such a hurry. However, Ji Yaoshue remained composed and asked in a deep voice. Empress, something bad has happened. Bai Yuhan panted slightly. The spirit vessels of the three dynasties are already approaching the capital. The emperors of the three dynasties are gathered, and there are dozens of void reversions and 200 nascent souls. They claim that they're here to pay their respects. Ji Yaoshue's expression changed. What? Dao Being Mingzhe exclaimed in shock. For the three emperors to enter the great Zhou dynasty at such a time and lead such powerful cultivators, they definitely had ill intentions and could not be here purely to pay their respects. Initially, the emperors of the three dynasties did not dare to venture deep into the capital of Great Zhou with a Dharma-characteristic Dao Lord guarding it. But now that the patriarch was dead, the three emperors had arrived on their imperial mounts. Empress, let's leave first, or it'll be too late. Bai Yuhan persuaded with a worried expression. Dao Being Mingzhe pondered for a moment before nodding as well. There are less than 10 void reversions in our capital. I'm afraid we won't be able to defeat them. Commander Bai is right. We should avoid them for now. Avoid? Ji Yaoshue laughed self-deprecatingly and asked, where can we hide? To Ethereal Peak. Dao Being Mingzhe said in a deep voice. Ethereal Peak has the old immortal crane guarding it. As long as we obtain the old immortal crane's support, you can lead the cultivation army to make a comeback and reclaim the capital. Ji Yaoshue shook her head. The foundation of Great Zhou is here. The capital of Great Zhou is here and the citizens of Great Zhou are here. Anyone can retreat except me. I'm the Empress of Great Zhou. The kings were in the palace, and if Ji Yaoshue retreated, the Great Zhou dynasty would be destroyed as well. Send a message to Ethereal Peak to ask Senior Crane for reinforcements. Ji Yaoshue took a deep breath and a resolute expression appeared on her face. Gather all the void reversions and nascent souls in the capital and get them to arrive as soon as possible. Our opponents are merely void reversions and nascent souls as well. As long as we can hold on, all the cultivators of the three dynasties will be buried here when Senior Crane of Ethereal Peak arrives. Understood. Bai Yuhan replied in a deep voice and retrieved a spirit crane from her storage bag. She wrote a few words and released it. At the same time, Dao Being Mingzhe released spirit cranes to gather the void reversions in the capital, in the depths of the palace. In front of a tomb, the kings stood side by side with solemn expressions. Before long, Ji Yaoshue arrived with many cultivators. 9 void reversions and 37 nascent souls followed behind her in a terrifying manner. What's going on? The kings were shocked. They knew that the Empress had called them over to give them a warning. However, they had not expected the Empress to create such a huge commotion. Kings, if you're done paying your respects, please return. Upon arriving, Ji Yaoshue did not bother to exchange pleasantries with the kings and said straightforwardly. The kings were stunned. However, immediately, a king reacted and cupped his hands in farewell. The remaining kings left one after another. Right then, a black cloud shrouded over from the skies not far away. The clouds rumbled and enveloped the entire capital of Great Zhou. Upon hearing that the Patriarch of Great Zhou has passed away, I, the Emperor of Great Xia, have come to pay my respects. I, the Emperor of Great Shang, have come to pay my respects. I, the Emperor of Great Yu, have come to pay my respects. All the kings were shocked and looked over. In the skies, 3 gigantic spirit vessels tore through the black clouds and figures stood on them, exuding a tremendous might as they cruised over slowly. Chapter 1096, Tao being Flying Wolf. Chapter 1096, Tao being Flying Wolf. Although the cultivation realms of the kings present were not high, they were all people of high status and authority. They quickly realized something. The emperors of 3 dynasties had arrived personally with so many cultivators to pay their respects. It was clear that they had ill intentions. If the empress could not withstand this calamity, the great Zhou dynasty would most likely be divided today. Ji Yaoxue was uneasy, and her palms were filled with cold sweat. However, she maintained her composure despite the circumstances and looked fearless. She must not panic. If she lost her cool, everyone would be doomed. The only thing she had to do was to delay as much as possible. 3 gigantic spirit vessels stopped above the crowd of cultivators. "What's wrong? You don't seem to welcome us, Empress?" The Emperor of Great Xia smiled and asked loudly. "If the 3 of you are here to pay your respects sincerely, I will naturally welcome you. However, if you have any ulterior motives..." Ji Yaoxue did not continue, but there was a hint of murderous intent in her tone. Even against the armies of the 3 dynasties, she did not show any fear. Fu. The 3 emperors exchanged glances and smiled mockingly. Prior to this, they might have been scared off by Ji Yaoxue's composure. But now, victory was within their grasp. Given the power and influence behind them, they could even flatten the aristocratic families of the North region, let alone the great Zhou dynasty. The spirit vessel dispersed, and the armies of the 3 dynasties descended slowly. Even though they had long received the news, there was still a commotion among the cultivators on the great Zhou side. Not everyone could remain calm in the face of such a terrifying formation like Ji Yaoxue. Among the crowd behind the 3 emperors, a green-robed cultivator stood between them. His gaze landed on Ji Yaoxue's face with a playful look. Arriving at the tomb of the great Zhou's patriarch, the Emperor of Great Xia shook his head gently and sighed. "What a pity! What a pity that you died early and can't see the great Zhou destroyed." The expressions of the great Zhou cultivators changed. This was an undisguised provocation. The 3 emperors bowed before the tomb of the great Zhou's patriarch before retreating to the front and looking at Ji Yaoxue with a fake smile. "Empress of Great Zhou, are you so calm because you're waiting for reinforcements from Ethereal Peak?" The Emperor of Great Xia suddenly laughed and asked. Ji Yaoxue remained silent. The Emperor of Great Shang reared his head in laughter. "To tell you the truth, you won't be able to wait any longer. From this day forth, not only will Great Zhou be removed, Ethereal Peak will be destroyed as well." At that point, the cultivators of Great Zhou could no longer maintain their composure. Ji Yaoxue's expression was cold as she said sternly, "The 3 of you, I have 9 void reversions and more than 30 nascent souls behind me. If we fight to the death, your 3 dynasties will suffer great losses as well." Fu. The Emperor of Great Xia smiled leisurely. "Empress of Great Xia, do you really think that you can fight against us? Flying Wolf, go." The moment he said that, a void reversion stood out from behind the Emperor of Great Xia. There was a hint of ferocity in his eyes, and he was filled with killing intent. Dao being Flying Wolf. Dao being Mingze frowned. Dao being Flying Wolf was originally an itinerant cultivator of the North region. He was ruthless and extremely ferocious. He had been famous for many years. To think that he had actually submitted to the Great Xia dynasty. Dao being Flying Wolf twisted his neck twice, and the sound of bones cracking could be heard from his body. For some unknown reason, under Dao being Mingze's gaze, Dao being Flying Wolf's cheeks shimmered with silver light. It was as though there were earthworms crawling within, and they disappeared quickly. Dao being Flying Wolf lunged towards Ji Yaoxue in huge strides. "You must have a death wish." Immediately, a void reversion stood out from behind Ji Yaoxue. Leaping into the air, he waved his sleeves and a flying sword sped forward, turning into a cold beam that shot towards Dao being Flying Wolf. The sword was extremely fast. However, Dao being Flying Wolf was even faster. In a flash, he disappeared from everyone's sight. Immediately after, everyone felt their cheeks heat up. In midair, Dao being Flying Wolf appeared and tore the void reversion into two, swallowing his essence spirit and chewing it. It was only when the blood splattered on everyone's faces that it felt warm. By that time, one of Great Zhou's 9 void reversions was already dead. Pissed. The crowd gasped. Dao being Mingze was shocked as well. Dao being Flying Wolf's combat strength was many times stronger than what he knew. Clang. Dao being Flying Wolf's arms trembled and a pair of cold claws with 4 dermic patterns appeared on his wrist. It was a supreme-grade Dao being dermic weapon. This was not common in the cultivation world of the Great Zhou dynasty. Even Dao being Mingze only had a superior-grade Dao being dermic weapon. Kill. A strange silver light flashed through Dao being Flying Wolf's eyes as he charged into the crowd. Dao being Mingze hurriedly retreated with Ji Yaoxue. 3 void reversions attacked at the same time and released dermic arts and dermic weapons, forming a gigantic barrier that wanted to trap Dao being Flying Wolf within. However, Dao being Flying Wolf was way too fast, and his movement technique was strange. In a flash, he passed through layers of barriers and arrived before the 3 void reversions. Broken limbs flew and blood mist spewed everywhere. In the blink of an eye, 3 void reversions were dead. There were only 5 void reversions left beside Ji Yaoxue. Die. 2 void reversions stood out and released a spirit consciousness attack without hesitation. Nobody in the Great Zhou dynasty knew about essence spirit secret skills. Dao being Flying Wolf was not afraid at all and condensed his spirit consciousness as well, colliding with the spirit consciousnesses of the 2 void reversions with a loud bang. Immediately after, the 2 void reversions grunted. A look of pain flashed through Dao being Flying Wolf's eyes as well. Their spirit consciousnesses clashed, and the 3 of them were injured at the same time. On the side of Great Zhou, another void reversion took the opportunity to attack. With a cold flash, he slashed Dao being Flying Wolf's neck. Clang! The sound of metal clashing echoed as the sword slashed forward and sparks flew everywhere. Impenetrable? Dao being Mingze's eyes widened. When did Dao being Flying Wolf's body become so strong? Even if the flying sword was an ordinary mid-grade Dao being dermic weapon, there was no way it could not pierce through Dao being Flying Wolf's body. Another dermic art descended and struck Dao being Flying Wolf squarely on the chest. However, it merely sent him tumbling. Dao being Flying Wolf stood up once more and his eyes shone with silver light. He grinned sinisterly and charged towards the few void reversions that attacked. Poof, poof, poof. Flashes of blood appeared. In less than 10 rounds, another 4 void reversions were killed by Dao being Flying Wolf. Mingze was the only void reversion left beside Ji Yaoxue. Many nascent souls of Great Zhou retreated repeatedly, and nobody dared to advance. Even void reversions had fallen one after another. There was nothing they could do even if they went up. Dao being Mingze felt chills run down his spine. It was only at this moment that he realized what sort of terrifying cultivators they were facing. Ji Yaoxue was devastated. Great Zhou was on the brink of destruction. Chapter 1097. Someone's bullying you. Chapter 1097. Someone's bullying you. Something isn't right. Dao being Mingze's expression was terrible. Although Dao being Flying Wolf was strong, he could not be that strong. Furthermore, if Dao being Flying Wolf had such combat strength, why would he listen to the orders of the Great Xia dynasty? Ever since the destruction of the Great Qian Empire 10,000 years ago, the current 4 dynasties of the North region no longer had their former glory and strength. Back then, there were 2 Buddhist monasteries presiding over the Great Qian Empire. The strength of an empire was comparable to a super sect. But now, let alone super sects, even the 4 dynasties could not compare to the 10 upper sects and aristocratic families of the North region. Given Dao being Flying Wolf's combat strength, he was more than qualified to join the upper sects. Why would he join the Great Xia dynasty? Dao Bing Mingze vaguely realized that the enemy's Great Zhou was facing this time round might be much more terrifying than the three dynasties. How confident did the three emperors have to be to pay a personal visit to the Great Zhou dynasty? The Emperor of Great Xia smiled leisurely. Empress of Great Zhou, why are the void reversions of your Great Zhou so weak and vulnerable? The Emperor of Great Yu said coldly, Ji Yaoxue, more than 100 years ago, your lover, Su Zimo, killed 1 million people from the allied army of our three dynasties in Songlang mountain range. It's time to settle this debt. Ji Yaoxue knew that she was definitely going to die today, and that the Great Zhou dynasty was about to be destroyed. There was no longer any fear in her heart as she sneered. The army of the three dynasties invaded the Great Zhou dynasty and slaughtered more than 1 million citizens wherever they passed. Those lowlifes were akin to mantises trying to stop a chariot by going against our three dynasties. They were the ones who had death wishes. A ferocious glint flashed through the eyes of the Emperor of Great Shang as he laughed sinisterly. Ji Yaoxue, Su Zimo is already a cripple. We don't even know if he's dead or alive. As such, that blood debt is now relegated to you. Ji Yaoshua's eyes dimmed when she heard that name. She had also heard about the battle 10 years ago. Even if Su Zimo could return once again, after his body was destroyed and the loss of his divine phoenix bone as well as creation green lotus, he would not be the invincible monster incarnate he was in the past. Such a blow was enough to destroy anyone. Ji Yaoxue looked into the distance and sighed internally. Zimo, I wonder if you're all right. We are not fated to meet again in this lifetime. At that moment, a strong sense of longing surged in her heart. Like a dying lantern, scenes of the two of them interacting appeared before her eyes. She was immersed in it and smiled gently, her eyes turning moist. Those scenes eventually condensed into a figure that appeared in her blurry vision. He wore green robes and had a slender figure. His black hair swayed and his eyes were clear. He was smiling at her with a gentle gaze as he walked over slowly. Was she hallucinating? Ji Yaoxue sniffed and laughed self-deprecatingly. Lowering her head slightly, she took out a short sword and prepared to commit suicide. Suddenly, she realized that all the cultivators present were looking in that direction with eyes widened in shock. Su. Dao Bing Mingze pointed into the distance and uttered words in disbelief, but he could not continue. Ji Yaoxue seemed to have realized something and looked up suddenly. Not far away, a green-robed cultivator truly appeared in her line of sight and arrived before her in the blink of an eye. Was she not hallucinating? Who was that person? The Emperor of Great Xia frowned and asked. The green-robed cultivator was merely at the void reversion realm. Why did some of the cultivators look as though they had seen a ghost when they saw him? It's him. Dao Bing Red Tiger of Dragon Tiger sect narrowed his gaze and said in a deep voice, Dao Bing Desolate Marshal, Su Zimo. In the crowd, a cold glint flashed through the green-robed young man's eyes as he murmured, Interesting. We were merely dealing with small fries. To think that a big fish would be lured out. Fu. The Emperor of Great Yu sneered. This person would still have some deterrence if this was 10 years ago. But now, he's merely a cripple. Ji Yaoxue looked at the intruder in a daze and called out softly in disbelief. Zimo? Her voice trembled as she extended her palm slowly, wanting to touch Su Zimo's cheek. However, she did not dare and her palm froze in midair. She was afraid that the illusion would disappear if she touched it. Su Zimo arrived beside Ji Yaoxue and reached out to gently wipe away the tears at the corner of her eyes. Ji Yaoxue no longer had any doubts as she felt the warmth in his palm. This was not a hallucination. The person before her was Su Zimo. Su Zimo sighed gently. Someone's bullying you. For some unknown reason, the moment that sigh sounded, a chill ran down the cultivators' spines and their hairs stood on end. It felt as though they were in great danger and were targeted by a pure-blooded, ferocious beast. Even the green-robed young man frowned and felt his scalp tingle. He shook his head to get rid of that feeling. Yes. Ji Yaoxue did not say anything more, and her dignified aura of an empress vanished instantly. As though she had been wronged, She merely nodded and acknowledged. At that moment, no one realized that her single yes reply had already determined their death sentence. Stop pretending. What's with that drama? Suddenly, Dao being Flying Wolf sneered. Dao being Desolate Marshal, your past glory is all in the past. Number 1 of the phenomenon ranking? Number 1 perfected lord? Number 1 Dao being? None of that has anything to do with you anymore. Oh. Suzimo could not help but laugh. This time round, he had merely been in seclusion for 10 years, and even a nobody in the cultivation world like Dao being Flying Wolf dared to jump out. Dao being Flying Wolf might have some reputation in the cultivation world of the North region, but he was far from being a true paragon. He had not even entered the Dao inheritance ground before. In other words, he was not even fit to carry Suzimo's shoes. Of course, the reason why Dao being Flying Wolf was so arrogant was because a half-martial ancestor expert attacked Suzimo 10 years ago. Logically speaking, after losing the Divine Phoenix Bone, the creation Green Lotus and his body being destroyed, Suzimo would definitely be reduced to an ordinary void reversion. However, no one knew that although Suzimo's body and bloodline were slightly weaker after reconstructing his Green Lotus true body, his combat strength was no weaker than 10 years ago. Suzimo, you came at the right time. The Emperor of Great Xia's gaze was cold as he said in a deep voice, 100 years ago, an army of 1,000,000 cultivators from the 3 dynasties were killed. We'll repay that blood debt with your life. Kill? Dao being Flying Wolf growled, and his figure flashed. Suddenly, he lunged towards Suzimo with a pair of sharp, bloody claws extending from his wrist. Suzimo looked at Dao being Flying Wolf, and his eyes suddenly shone with a strange black light. Heavenly Fiend Eye. It was a visual technique of the Dao Heart Fiend Seed Sutra. Cultivators with weak wills and Dao hearts would be easily controlled and lose consciousness. Suddenly, Dao being Flying Wolf stopped in his tracks and stood rooted to the spot in a daze, as though he had lost his soul. Although the Heavenly Fiend Eye did not have much lethality, it was still a fiend technique from the ancient era, and Dao being Flying Wolf could not defend against it. Ah! Cries of surprises came from the crowd. Everyone witnessed how ferocious Dao being Flying Wolf was earlier on. 8 void reversions of the Great Zhou dynasty were killed by him alone. But now, Dao being Flying Wolf was no match for Suzimo's gaze and had given up on resisting after a single glance. He stood motionlessly on the spot at the moment. Any nascent soul would be able to kill him with ease, let alone Suzimo. Chapter 1098, Strange Power. Chapter 1098, Strange Power. It's a visual technique. As someone from one of the upper sects, Dao being Red Tiger was the first to react and said in the crowd. Right then, Dao being Flying Wolf's body shuddered, and a sudden movement came from his body. Strange silver threads appeared on his cheeks. Thereafter, silver light shone from his eyes. Suzimo's expression changed, and a look of surprise flashed through his eyes. There was clearly an extremely strange power in Dao being Flying Wolf's body. With the burst of that power, he managed to break free from the control of the Heavenly Fiend Eye. Suzimo did not think too much about it. He flicked his finger and dermic powers formed a sword chi that shot out. Poof! The dermic power sword chi entered Dao being Flying Wolf's glabella instantly. Suzimo did not need to use any dermic arts against ordinary void reversions. Even the simplest transformation of dermic powers into a single sword chi could create immense lethality. Although he was at the mid-stage void reversion realm, his essence spirit had become incomparably pure after being tempered by the top cultivation techniques of the immortal, Buddhist, and fiend sects. The range of his spirit consciousness was more than 500 kilometers and was comparable to Dharma-characteristic Dao Lords. His dermic powers were even more terrifying. This was the purest form of suppression through brute force. Under countless gazes, Dao being Flying Wolf had just broken free from the control of the Heavenly Fiend Eye and was about to regain consciousness when Suzimo's dermic power sword chi penetrated his glabella. Dao being Flying Wolf's essence spirit was destroyed and he died on the spot. Although Dao Being Flying Wolf was dead, Su Zimo was puzzled by the sudden surge of power that appeared in the latter's body. Clearly, if not for that power, Dao Being Flying Wolf's combat strength would not have reached that level either. It was impossible for him to kill 8 void reversions of Great Zhou single-handedly. Go, kill him. The Emperor of Great Xia said fiercely, kill Desolate Marshal and you'll be famous throughout the world. That's right, he's alone. All of you, attack together. The Emperor of Great Yu shouted as well. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. Immediately, 8 void reversions stood out from behind the 3 emperors with strange silver lines appearing on their faces. Finally, silver light flashed through the eyes of the void reversions as they attacked at the same time. Instantly, more than 10 flying swords tore through the air. In midair, a few void reversions even conjured dermic arts and arrived. That technique again? Su Zimo furrowed his brows slightly. The dermic weapons and dermic arts of these void reversions were not worth mentioning. However, the silver threads that appeared on their bodies caused their strength to double and their combat strength to soar. Su Zimo had never seen such methods before. Of course, even if the combat strength of the void reversions were doubled, there was nothing to fear. Su Zimo extended his finger and tapped forward. Boom! Suddenly, a dark cloud condensed above the heads of the cultivators. It was pitch black as ink and streaks of blinding lightning descended from the skies. It connected the heavens and the earth. Electric arcs intertwined endlessly, forming a gigantic thunderstorm. The green-robed cultivator was shocked and retreated immediately. The cultivators of the 3 dynasties reacted and retreated. Bang! Boom! Boom! The terrifying thunderstorm exuded a tremendous might as though it could destroy everything and instantly engulfed the 8 void reversions that attacked. Their flying swords, spirit weapons, and dermic arts were all enveloped by the purple thunderstorm. A moment later, the storm dissipated. There were only 8 charred corpses on the ground that were beyond recognition. Green smoke billowed from their bodies, and they were already dead. The dermic arts of the void reversions were also devoured by the thunderstorm and vanished without a trace. There were many flying swords and spirit weapons scattered on the ground. None of them were intact. That dermic art was so terrifying that even dermic weapons could not withstand it and were smashed into pieces. After the Purple Thunder Manual was fused with the Green Thunder Manual, it formed the complete cultivation technique, the Great Void Spirit Refinement section. The original Purple Thunderstorm had also turned into the current Thunderstorm. Its power was even more shocking. On the side of the 3 dynasties, the emperors of the 3 dynasties, void reversions, and many nascent souls were shocked and trembling with deep fear in their eyes. The cultivators gulped. Wasn't Dao Being Desolate Marshal's body crippled and his combat strength greatly reduced after losing the Creation Green Lotus and Divine Phoenix Bone? Didn't they say that Dao Being Desolate Marshal was already a cripple? What was going on? In the face of that dermic art, they felt as insignificant as ants. This was not an illusion. Given Su Zimo's current dermic powers, the thunderstorm was not much weaker than the power of a Dharma characteristic Dao Lord if it was released at full power. It seems like there's been some commotion. Su Zimo shrugged with a relaxed expression. The reason why he released that dermic art was not to deal with the void reversions. He merely wanted to see how powerful the dermic art was. After all, he had not fought anyone since he entered seclusion at the bottom of the Dragon Burial Valley. The green-robed young man frowned deeply. The contempt and mockery in his eyes had long vanished. Su Zimo's combat strength seemed to be different from the rumors. Given his strength, he did not have absolute confidence in killing Su Zimo even if he attacked. Of course, he could still maintain his composure. Even if void reversions like them could not suppress Su Zimo, there was still a Dharma characteristic of the Dragon Tiger sect in the capital of Great Zhou. The Dharma characteristic Dao Lord must have sensed the commotion. All of you, attack together. Right then, Dao Being Red Tiger hollered, Desolate Marshal's body was destroyed and his reconstructed body is extremely weak. If you guys fight him in close combat, you'll definitely be able to severely injure him. His words jolted everyone into realization. 10 years ago, Su Zimo lost his body, but his essence spirit was not injured. Right now, they were definitely not a match for Su Zimo in terms of dermic techniques. In the cultivation world, all cultivators knew some common knowledge. If void reversions lost their bodies, it would be difficult for them to recover their former combat strength, whether it was through assimilation or purchasing a void reversion physical body. In the past, Su Zimo had a terrifying physique and was invincible in melee combat. But now, his body was his greatest weakness. At that thought, 6 cultivators suddenly appeared from the crowd. Their eyes flashed with silver light as they burst forth with their full speed towards Su Zimo. Fellow Taoist, be careful. When Dao Being Mingze saw that Su Zimo was motionless, he reminded hurriedly, if they want to engage in melee combat, you have to keep your distance. There's no need. Smiling gently, Su Zimo channeled his spirit consciousness and channeled his dermic powers to his fingertips. He flicked his finger gently. Shing, shing, shing. Beams of dermic power sword chi shot out at an extremely fast speed towards the 6 void reversions charging over. Poof! A void reversion could not dodge in time, and his head was pierced by the dermic power sword chi, causing his essence spirit to dissipate. The other 5 void reversions slowed down hurriedly. One of them turned sideways slightly to avoid the sharpness of the dermic power sword chi. Before he could catch his breath, he caught sight of something from the corner of his eye and was scared out of his wits. The dermic power sword chi had already swept past him when it suddenly paused. As though it had a mind of its own, it spun its blade and stabbed towards the back of his head. Poof! Blood flashed. The void reversion fell to the ground dead. Chapter 1099. What are you trying to do? Chapter 1099. What are you trying to do? With Su Zimo's spirit consciousness, he could control dermic powers with ease. The dermic power sword chi that shot out from midair were extremely sentient. As though they were alive, they circled around the void reversions that were charging over and shuttled back and forth. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. Even if a void reversion could dodge the first attack, he could not dodge the second. Even if he could dodge the second attack, he could not escape the encirclement of 2 or even multiple sword chi. The void reversion stood on the spot and shifted around. They were already on the brink of death, let alone close in. The 3 emperors were already pale with fright. Instinctively, they wanted to turn around and look at the green-robed young man. But soon, a voice sounded in the mind of the 3 emperors. Don't turn back. If you dare look at me, I'll kill you right now. The green-robed young man's voice contained a cold and sinister killing intent. The 3 emperors shuddered and did not dare to do anything else. The green-robed young man's expression was grim as his eyes shifted. He looked at Dao Being Red Tiger beside him with a cold gaze filled with doubt and killing intent. Didn't you say that there's a Dharma characteristic Dao Lord in the capital of Great Zhou? The green-robed young man sent a voice transmission with his spirit consciousness. Where is he? Why hasn't he appeared despite the commotion here? Dao Being Red Tiger's expression was terrible. Elder Sun had indeed arrived at the capital of Great Zhou. However, for some reason, he did not appear. In reality, Elder Sun of Dragon Tiger sect was nearby. However, he did not dare to attack. The person at the bottom of the Dragon Burial Valley was still alive. In the current cultivation world, not many people would dare to attack Su Zimo if they were a major cultivation realm apart from the latter. Back in the Dragon Burial Valley, a half-martial ancestor of Chaos Essence sect was severely injured, and a conjoint body mighty figure died. According to what the person from Dragon Burial Valley said, he would not interfere even if Su Zimo died in a fight between cultivators of the same cultivation realm. He could only blame Su Zimo for not being skilled enough. However, the situation was different if it was a Dharma characteristic Dao Lord who fought. It was easy for him to kill Su Zimo, but he and Dragon Tiger sect would have to endure the wrath of a Mahayana patriarch. Dragon Tiger sect won't be able to withstand even a Mahayana patriarch in his twilight years. In the blink of an eye, The 6 void reversions that had just entered the battlefield were dead. Dao being Red Tiger clenched his fists slightly. Under the gaze of the green-robed young man, he felt as though he was being stabbed in the back. A bunch of trash. Dao being Red Tiger stood out and took out a gigantic thick saber from his storage bag. He twisted his neck with a series of crackling sounds. Golden threads appeared on his cheeks in a strange manner. The golden threads disappeared as soon as they appeared on his cheeks. However, Dao being Red Tiger's eyes shone with a strange golden light. Su Zimo's heart skipped a beat, and he frowned slightly. It was that strange method again. Furthermore, the golden thread was clearly a level higher than the silver thread. After the golden threads appeared, Dao being Red Tiger's aura clearly became stronger. Right then, Ji Yaoshua exclaimed softly as well. Dragon Tiger Sect? Ji Yaoshua noticed Dao being Red Tiger's sect badge and asked with a grim expression, as one of the 10 upper sects of the North region, why would the Dragon Tiger sect participate in a fight between dynasties? For the past 10,000 years, none of the 4 dynasties had the support of upper sects or aristocratic families. For example, in the Great Zhou dynasty, other than some small sects and factions, Ethereal Peak and True Fire sect, who were part of the 5 major sects, were among the top. This was not a strange phenomenon. It was also due to the catastrophe 10,000 years ago. Back then, the Great Qin Empire was strong and had a strong foundation. Within the territory, there were 2 Buddhist monasteries guarding it, and the upper sects and aristocratic families submitted to them readily. Even so, a calamity descended and the Great Qin Empire was annihilated. The 2 Buddhist monasteries were destroyed and dissipated in Tianhuang mainland as well. From then on, although the 4 dynasties were formed in the territories of the Great Qin Empire, there were no upper sects or aristocratic families involved anymore. If even 2 super sects like the Buddhist monasteries were destroyed because of the Great Qin Empire, it was normal for the upper sects and aristocratic families to be even more cautious. There was a tacit understanding between the upper sects and aristocratic families. Nobody would be involved with the 4 dynasties. But now, the Dragon Tiger sect was involved in the fight between the 4 dynasties, and it was equivalent to breaking a balance. That surprised Ji Yaoshua. Was this the intention of the Dragon Tiger sect, or the Void Reversion himself? Dao being Red Tiger glared at Su Zimo and grinned. Dragging his gigantic thick saber, his blood chi burst forth with a bang as he charged towards Su Zimo. Swoosh! The wind howled. Dao being Red Tiger's movement technique was more than twice as fast as the Void Reversion earlier on. The Dragon Tiger sect was one of the 10 upper sects of the North region. The Dragon Tiger Sutra of the sect was a top-notch body tempering cultivation technique in the cultivation world. Dao being Red Tiger's physique and blood chi were not weak to begin with. With the help of the strange power derived from the golden threads, his speed had already reached its limits. There were even afterimages in his wake. Zimo, watch out! Ji Yaoshua exclaimed softly. The combat strength of this Void Reversion was clearly not on the same level as the Void Reversion earlier on. Su Zimo's expression was indifferent, and there was no fluctuation in his eyes. Standing on the spot without any intention of retreating, he flicked his finger gently and shot out a sword chi. Shing! The sword chi tore through the air and stabbed towards Dao being Red Tiger's glabella. Dao being Red Tiger's figure was still in midair when he suddenly twisted his body and avoided the sword chi by a hair's breadth. Without stopping, he continued charging forward. Shing! The sword chi turned around. Dao being Red Tiger's figure flashed again. If he wanted to maintain his charging speed, he would not be able to avoid Su Zimo's dermic power sword chi perfectly. Poof! The sword chi streaked across Dao being Red Tiger's arm. A blood arrow spewed out and scattered in the void. A gigantic sword wound appeared on Dao being Red Tiger's shoulder as blood gushed out. Su Zimo raised his brow. Normally, the sharpness of the sword chi should have been enough to sever Dao being Red Tiger's entire arm. But now, it only left a single wound on his body. With the help of that strange power, Dao being Red Tiger's body became much stronger. Earlier on, his wound was still dripping with blood. However, in the blink of an eye, The bleeding had stopped and golden lights shone on the wound. The flesh on both sides of the wound began to close up, showing signs of healing. Interesting. Suzimo narrowed his eyes. While he was in a daze, Dao being Red Tiger had already closed in with a frenzied expression and a menacing gaze. Desolate Marshal, hand over your life. At that distance, he was extremely confident that he could behead Suzimo. Whoosh! The thick saber in Dao being Red Tiger's hands shone with 5 bedazzling lights. 5 dermic patterns, a perfect Dao being dermic weapon. This was extremely rare even among the 4 dynasties. A saber beam flashed and slashed down fiercely. However, Suzimo seemed oblivious to it. Just as the saber was about to slash Suzimo's neck, he suddenly reached out and grabbed it. He did not budge at all. Despite wielding the thick saber in his hands, he was unscathed. Suzimo turned his head slightly and asked with a fake smile, "What are you trying to do?" Chapter 1100, Slaying Red Tiger. Chapter 1100, Slaying Red Tiger. All the cultivators were dumbfounded and speechless. Dao being Red Tiger's expression froze instantly as disbelief filled his eyes. Suzimo's question rumbled in his mind. What are you trying to do? Dao being Red Tiger's mind was in chaos. That's right, what was he trying to do? The reason why he released all his strength and methods and even endured the injury of Suzimo's dermic power sword chi was so that he could rush over, close the distance and engage in melee combat. But now, the two of them were merely inches apart. However, his thick saber was gripped firmly by a fair and tender palm and could not move at all. This was a perfect Dao being dermic weapon, slicing through a single strand of hair and cutting iron like mud. Even those could not describe the sharpness of this thick saber. However, such a divine weapon was grabbed by the cultivator before him with his bare hands. He was not even gripping the handle, but the blade that was shimmering with a cold sharpness. What was he trying to do? What could he do? His plans, analysis, and the many trump cards that he was prepared to unleash next seemed extremely laughable at this moment. Dao being Red Tiger did not understand. It was absolutely true that the D clan's half-martial ancestor had crippled this person's body. Many cultivators in the Dao inheritance ground witnessed it. How was this person still able to withstand the sharpness of a perfect Dao being dermic weapon with his body? The most frightening thing was that his thick saber could not even scratch the person's skin. There was no way Dao being Red Tiger could have understood. It was true that Suzimo's Green Lotus True Body was inferior to the Dragon True Body in terms of bloodline and strength. However, the toughness of this Green Lotus True Body was not any weaker. Before the Grade 6 creation Green Lotus shattered, it was comparable to a Khanate Dao Lord dermic weapon. Suzimo's skin was made of lotus leaves. Even Khanate Dao being dermic weapons could not hurt him, let alone perfect Dao being dermic weapons. Initially, Dao being Red Tiger thought that the monster incarnate of the past had already fallen from grace, and he wanted to take advantage of the situation to trample on him. However, it was only at this moment that he realized that the monster incarnate of the past was still at the peak. The ladder was so high up that he could not even touch the hem of the other party's clothes. You think you can hurt me with that piece of scrap metal? Suzimo's gaze intensified, and he exerted strength in his fingers. There was a cracking sound that pierced through the skies. Suzimo broke the blade with his bare hands. The 5 blazing lights on the thick saber dimmed instantly. A perfect Dao being dermic weapon was destroyed by Suzimo barehanded in front of everyone. The sound of breaking echoed, and all the cultivators present shuddered. Their hearts skipped a beat, and they forgot to breathe for a moment. Cultivators of the 3 dynasties looked at Suzimo with endless fear. This person had completely surpassed their understanding. This scene once again awakened their long-lost memories. They finally realized who they were facing. This was the terrifying existence that killed 8 titular disciples in the Dao inheritance ground single-handedly. There were countless paragons and monster incarnates that died in his hands. Compared to those paragons and monster incarnates, they were insignificant. Dao being Red Tiger gulped, and retreated with a horrified expression. In front of Su Zimo, he did not even dare to make large motions and merely moved backwards slowly step by step. It took him less than 3 breaths to reach Su Zimo. However, it felt as though a century had passed just by taking 3 steps back. He was scared out of his wits. Su Zimo looked at the shivering Dao being Red Tiger and shook his head, smiling gently. It's too late to leave now. Swash! A bolt of lightning flashed. Su Zimo had already vanished from the spot. Dao being Red Tiger's pupils constricted, and he exerted strength in his legs, wanting to retreat. However, he only felt a cold glint flash before his eyes. Gripping the broken blade of the thick saber, Su Zimo slashed Dao being Red Tiger's throat viciously. Chi! A blood mist spewed out. Su Zimo's figure disappeared once more, and he had already dodged. Dao being Red Tiger widened his eyes and staggered backwards, clutching his throat. However, scarlet blood was gushing out from the gaps between his fingers. Although the power of the golden silkworm in his body was strong, it was still difficult for him to recover from a fatal injury to his throat. The life force of his body was draining rapidly and his blood chi was declining. Dao being Red Tiger realized that his body was already crippled. Sure. With a flash of light, his essence spirit escaped from the top of his head. His essence spirit left his body. As though he had expected it, Su Zimo tossed his hand casually. The broken blade that was still in his palm vanished and turned into a cold beam of light that slashed at Dao being Red Tiger's essence spirit instantly. Dao being Red Tiger died on the spot without saying anything. After killing Dao being Red Tiger, Su Zimo glanced at a distant corner indifferently, as though he had just crushed an ant casually. There was a cultivator hidden in that corner. Dressed in the robes of the Dragon Tiger sect, his beard was grayish-white. He was elder son of the Dragon Tiger sect who had arrived at the capital of Great Zhou long ago and was hiding nearby. Even after the disciples of the sect died, he did not appear. He was still holding back. However, at that moment, Dao being Desolate Marshal's gaze drifted towards him, causing Elder Son's heart to skip a beat. Could that lad have discovered my tracks? Elder Son frowned slightly with a bewildered expression. While he was feeling puzzled, Dao being Desolate Marshal had already retracted his gaze, as though that glance was merely a coincidence. Elder Son heaved a sigh of relief and lamented internally, I was overthinking. This lad is only at the mid-stage void reversion realm. How could he have detected me? On the other side, Su Zimo retracted his gaze. The moment he arrived, he had already sensed that there was a Dharma characteristic Dao Lord hidden in that corner. His spirit consciousness was comparable to Dharma characteristic Dao Lords, and with the help of his spirit perception, there was no way Elder Son's tracks could escape his senses. He was not bothered by this Dharma characteristic Dao Lord. If that person chose not to appear, Su Zimo would not take the initiative to provoke him either. His gaze landed on the 3 emperors once more. The 3 emperors felt their hearts turn cold. Run. There was only a single thought in the 3 emperors' minds. The Dharma characteristic Dao Lord of Dragon Tiger sect did not appear, and they only had one option, escape. Nobody is allowed to leave without my permission. Although Su Zimo's voice was neither loud nor soft, it was heard by every void reversion with an unquestionable authority. However, the cultivators of the 3 dynasties were scared out of their wits and did not dare to stay. In everyone's opinion, they would definitely die if they remained in the capital. Including nascent souls, there were more than 200 cultivators left in the 3 dynasties. However, Su Zimo was alone. As long as everyone dispersed and fled in all directions, there was no way Su Zimo could keep all of them. The green-robed young man was also hidden in the crowd and fled out of the city amidst the chaos. Su Zimo's gaze turned cold as he rose slowly and hovered in midair, saying coldly, anyone who makes a move rashly shall die. Chapter 11:01 Reunion. Chapter 11:01 Reunion. Boom. Su Zimo released his massive spirit consciousness and descended, enveloping the 200-odd cultivators from the 3 dynasties that were escaping. His spirit consciousness was comparable to Dharma-characteristic Tao lords. Nascent souls could not defend against the pressure of that spirit consciousness at all. Figures fell from midair one after another. Many nascent souls were suppressed by the massive spirit consciousness and could not move at all. As for the remaining dozens of void reversions, although they could still withstand the pressure of Su Zimo's spirit consciousness and escape, their speed was much slower. Su Zimo's expression was indifferent as a green glow burst forth from his glabella. 54 green lotus seeds appeared and tore through the air. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. Every single green lotus seed was an essence spirit dharmic weapon. The green lotus seeds carried sharp auras. Under the suppression of Su Zimo's spirit consciousness, the speed of the void reversions decreased significantly. They could not avoid the attacks of the green lotus seeds at all. Poof! A green light flashed and a green lotus seed penetrated a void reversion. A bloodied hole appeared on the forehead of the void reversion, and his essence spirit was destroyed. He tilted his head, and his corpse fell from midair. Poof, poof, poof. In the blink of an eye, 3 more void reversions had their heads pierced by green lights. Even if cultivators used dharmic weapons to defend against the green lotus seeds, they would not be able to defend against the killing power of the lotus seeds against essence spirits. The 54 green lotus seeds surrounded the remaining dozens of void reversions. In the blink of an eye, 10 void reversions were dead. Furthermore, this was Su Zimo holding back. If he wanted to kill them all, he could erase all the void reversions with a single thought. He had another motive for leaving these people behind. There were still more than 20 void reversions left in midair. They looked at the green lotus seeds surrounding them with frightened expressions and did not dare to move anymore. They had never seen such methods before. The lives of void reversions were easily reaped by the lotus seeds. At Su Zimo's signal, the remaining 20 void reversions descended once more. Master, what should we do? The Emperor of Great Xia turned pale and could not help but send a voice transmission. Do as I say later. I guarantee that you guys won't die. The green-robed young man was expressionless as he squeezed into the crowd and sent a voice transmission to the 3 emperors. He was cautious by nature. The more it was like this, the more he would not reveal himself and hide. Su Zimo, let's make a deal. Suddenly, the Emperor of Great Xia said. Su Zimo shook his head and said indifferently, You guys are only prisoners now. You don't have the right to make a deal or negotiate terms with me. Not necessarily. The Emperor of Great Xia took a deep breath and said slowly, It's easy for you to kill us, but the tens of millions of citizens in the capital of Great Zhou will have to die with us. Suppressing the fear in his heart, the Emperor of Great Xia maintained his composure and continued, When we descended here, we planted a poison in the capital. Without the antidote, the citizens of the capital won't be able to survive till tomorrow. Oh. Su Zimo was expressionless and unmoved. He had experienced too much and naturally wouldn't be intimidated by the words of the Emperor of Great Xia. When the Emperor of Great Xia saw that Su Zimo did not believe him, he smiled gently. Over the past few days, some people have already died from the poison in the Great Zhou Dynasty's territory. I believe that the Empress of Great Zhou should have received some news. Both Su Zimo and Ji Yaoshua's expressions changed when they heard that. The first thing that came to Su Zimo's mind was the tragic deaths of the commoners and mortals. At the same time, Ji Yaoshua recalled the news that she had received over the past few days. Indeed, some of the livestock and villagers in the cities and villages had all died. The Emperor of Great Xia said, Those who are poisoned will be filled with poison boils, and their blood will turn black. Eventually, their abdomen will swell and explode, leading to their deaths. Su Zimo no longer had any doubts. Did you poison those people? Su Zimo's gaze was cold and his heart surged with killing intent as he glared at the Emperor of Great Xia. Under that gaze, the Emperor of Great Xia felt his legs go weak and he nearly slumped to the ground. He said hurriedly, It's useless even if you kill me. The antidote is not with me. However, I can guarantee that as long as you let us go, the millions of citizens in the capital of Great Zhou will be able to survive. I swear on my honor. Afraid that Su Zimo would not believe him, the Emperor of Great Xia added hurriedly. Given your despicable nature of indiscriminate killing, what honor is there to speak of? The killing intent in Su Zimo's eyes did not dissipate at all. Instead, it intensified. Zimo. Ji Yaoshue tugged at Su Zimo's arm and called out softly. She had no choice but to use the lives of millions of citizens of Great Zhou as a bargaining chip. She was afraid that Su Zimo would kill the void reversions on impulse, and the millions of citizens of Great Zhou would die as a result. Su Zimo closed his eyes. If it was any other situation, it would have been fine. However, he had no clue about that strange poison and was helpless. Given the current situation, he could only compromise. Compared to the lives of millions of citizens of Great Zhou, the lives of the Emperor of Great Xia and the others were insignificant. All right, I agree to let you guys go. Su Zimo took a deep breath and said slowly. The Emperor of Great Xia rolled his eyes and mustered his courage. That won't do. You have to swear an oath. Without any evidence, who knows if you won't go back on your words? Killing intent surged in Su Zimo's heart. His original plan was to release this group of people. Once he saved the lives of the citizens of Great Zhou, even if he had to chase them to the ends of the world, he would find the Emperor of Great Xia once more and grind his bones into ashes. However, the Emperor of Great Xia was extremely scheming and cunning. He could vaguely guess something, hence his intention to make Su Zimo swear the Dao Oath. If he made a Dao Oath, Su Zimo would not be able to attack the Emperor of Great Xia. But now, he had no other choice. All right. After a long silence, Su Zimo said slowly, I promise you that from this day forth, brother, don't agree to him. Right then, a pleasant voice sounded from afar, interrupting Su Zimo's vow. When he heard that voice, Su Zimo shuddered and his eyes were filled with surprise. He spun around and looked in the direction of the voice. Not far away, two cultivators were speeding over. It was a man and a woman. The man had black hair and clothes. Young with a cold expression, his face was sharp and his eyes were deep like the sea. The black-robed man was neither tall nor burly. However, he was extremely well-proportioned, giving off a sense of agility and strength. It was Night Spirit. Night Spirit did not change much after more than 100 years. Even the dangerous aura around him had been retracted. If not for Su Zimo's strong spirit perception, he might not have been able to sense it. Su Zimo's gaze shifted to the woman beside Night Spirit. The woman was beautiful and had a gentle aura. She bore a resemblance to Su Zimo. She looked at Su Zimo with reddened eyes. Su Zimo's initially sharp gaze turned gentle, and he could not help but laugh. It was Su Xiaoning. After so many years, the siblings were reunited. Chapter 1102, Heretical Doctrine. Chapter 1102, Heretical Doctrine. There was no need for words between siblings. It was a great relief and joy to see that the other party was fine. Su Zimo had many things to say since he had not met Xiaoning and Night Spirit for a long time. However, there were still some troublesome matters that he had yet to settle. Xiaoning glanced sideways in the direction of the Emperor of Great Xia and said in a deep voice, Brother, don't listen to his nonsense. Those symptoms weren't caused by poison at all. When he heard that, the Emperor of Great Xia's expression did not change, and he forced himself to remain calm. However, a layer of cold sweat appeared on his forehead, and he looked guilty. The green-robed young man hidden in the crowd watched coldly with an expressionless face. Back then, Su Zimo had already determined that it did not seem like a simple case of poisoning. However, he knew nothing about the symptoms and had no solution. That was the reason why he wanted to compromise. Even though he was strong, he was helpless against such a situation. Sister, have you seen such a situation before? Ji Yaoshue could not help but ask. Yes. Xiaoning nodded. Those symptoms are caused by the black blood goo. Goo? Su Zimo furrowed his brows slightly. There are many types of goo, and they are all poisonous bugs that are nurtured through secret techniques over many years. They are a powerful life form to begin with. Xiaoning pointed to Dao Being Flying Wolf's corpse and said, that cultivator was implanted with the silver silkworm goo beforehand. With the help of the silver silkworm goo, his body will become stronger and his defense will increase. His speed and strength will also increase. Su Zimo's eyes revealed a look of realization. It was no wonder why Dao Being Flying Wolf's combat strength increased after the silver threads appeared on his body. If the goo worm itself was a living being and fused with Dao Being Flying Wolf, the increase in strength would make sense. This Dragon Tiger sect cultivator was poisoned by the golden silkworm goo. It's even more powerful and rarer than the silver silkworm goo. In the cultivation world, there's a type of cultivator who uses the golden silkworm goo to cultivate, and they are called goo masters. Xiaoning's eyes revealed a hint of sadness. Although the combat strength of these cultivators increased greatly after receiving the help of the goo worm, their lives are in the hands of the goo masters who planted the goo for them. A goo master can kill them with a single thought using the goo worms in their bodies. There were poisonous insects hidden in their bodies. Such methods sounded sinister and frightening. Just the thought of it made one shudder. Goo master? Su Zimo muttered softly. He was not the only one. All the cultivators present looked confused as well. It was clear that they had never heard of such a strange poisonous insect or goo master. Xiaoning said, right now, goo masters hardly appear. Even so, there's a sect where this technique is passed down. Su Zimo's heart skipped a beat and he blurted, one of the 5 heretical doctrines, the goo sect. That's right. Xiaoning nodded. The 5 heretical doctrines included tomb sect, poison sect, puppet sect, corpse refinement cult, and goo sect. The other 4 were relatively active, and Su Zimo had interacted with them ever since he started cultivating. However, the successor of goo sect was the only one who had never appeared. Xiaoning continued, furthermore, the goo in these people's bodies is an ancient poisonous insect that has been extinct for many years, the black blood goo. The black blood goo is extremely ferocious. Even cultivators who have not formed a core would not be able to defend against it, let alone mortals. When he heard that, the Emperor of Great Xia's face turned incomparably pale. Normally speaking, without the control of a goo master, the goo worms would not harm anyone. Little Gaze looked at the Emperor of Great Xia and the others and said coldly, in other words, there's a goo master among the 20-odd cultivators. That's why the citizens of the capital of Great Zhou were poisoned by the black blood goo. After not seeing her for more than 100 years, Xiaoning was no longer as weak as before, and there was a hint of authority in her eyes. It was only then that Su Zimo noticed that Xiaoning had already entered the void reversion realm. For cultivators of unorthodox groups such as Elixir Yang sect, because elixir refinement required time and energy, their cultivation speed would definitely not be fast. To think that Xiaoning would have broken through the norm. The reason why Su Zimo was able to get to his current cultivation realm was due to all the opportunities he had obtained throughout the years. If so, Xiaoning must have had quite an amazing journey all these years as well. She was at the void reversion realm and exposed the lie of the Emperor of Great Xia. Under her gaze, the Emperor of Great Xia could not withstand the pressure and knelt down with a thud. And no, it's not me. The voice of the Emperor of Great Xia was trembling with fear as he said with difficulty, it's... Just as the Emperor of Great Xia knelt down, a strange scarlet line of blood appeared on his face. However, he did not notice it. Su Zimo focused his gaze and was about to move when he heard a thud. A crisp sound echoed in the mind of the Emperor of Great Xia. It was the sound of his essence spirit shattering. Instantly, his gaze turned sluggish and the life force in his body disappeared. He sprawled on the ground with widened eyes. He was dead. Su Zimo's expression darkened. Xiaoning was right. There was a goo master hiding among the cultivators, and he had even killed the Emperor of Great Xia using the goo worm technique right under his nose. The Emperor of Great Xia was merely a puppet. Right from the beginning, Su Zimo did not sense any signs of any cultivators attacking. To be able to hide from his senses, This goo master was truly capable. Su Zimo's gaze swept across the 20-odd void reversions before him one after another, but he did not notice anything unusual. All right. Su Zimo nodded. If you don't come out, I'll kill all of you one by one. Let's see how long you can hide for. The expressions of Emperor of Great Shang and the others changed. They knew that Su Zimo was someone decisive to kill. Since he said that, he would definitely be able to do it. However, all of them were poisoned by goo worms. If they ratted the green-robed young man out, they would die immediately and end up the same as the Emperor of Great Xia. Su Zimo, it's useless even if you kill us and that goo master. The Emperor of Great Shang laughed bitterly. As long as he refuses to save us, the tens of millions of citizens of Great Zhou will have to die with him. That's right. Only by releasing us can you save the tens of millions of citizens. The Emperor of Great Yu mustered his courage and said, "Everything in this world has its counter." Xiaoning sneered. Although the black blood goo is domineering, it's not like there's no way to break it. Level 5 elixirs and 7 treasures blood transformation pills are the greatest nemesis of the black blood goo. The others did not react when they heard that. However, the green-robed young man's pupils constricted slightly. Although they were called the 7 treasures, they were only the most common spirit materials. While the refinement process was relatively complicated, they were fatal to the black blood goo. The rescue process was relatively simple as well. As long as the 7 treasures blood transformation pill was dissolved in water, a single drop of water would be enough to kill the black blood goo within a living being's body. Normally speaking, with the extinction of the black blood goo, the recipe for the 7 treasures blood transformation pill was long lost as well. The green-robed young man had not expected that there would be an elixir refinement master who knew about the 7 treasures blood transformation pill in this dynasty that was not considered as a prosperous cultivation civilization. Chapter 1103, Location of the Witch Race. Chapter 1103, Location of the Witch Race. The green-robed young man had no idea that Xiaoning had obtained the inheritance of the ancient elixir pool sect in the elementary ancient battlefield. While other sects could not refine the 7 treasures blood transformation pill, Xiaoning could. An ancient elixir furnace suddenly flew out from Xiaoning's glabella. It was an ancient treasure left behind by elixir pool sect. Nobody knew what Xiaoning was up to. She took out a few spirit herbs from her storage bag and tossed them into the elixir furnace. Thereafter, she conjured a series of flames and began refining the spirit herbs in the furnace. Before long, a medicinal fragrance wafted out from the elixir furnace. Xiaoning waved her hand gently, and the mist drifted towards the direction of the Emperor of Great Shang and the others. In the blink of an eye, the mist enveloped more than 20 void reversions. The Emperor of Great Shang and the others frowned. For some reason, after smelling the medicinal fragrance, they could clearly feel the goo worms in their bodies itching. However, the green-robed young man's expression changed starkly. He suddenly realized that the female cultivator had refined a barrier-breaking incense that targeted goo worms. The weaker the goo worm, the weaker its reaction to the barrier-breaking incense. The stronger the goo worm, the more intense the reaction. Black lines as thick as blood vessels appeared on the green-robed young man's face. He looked menacing and terrifying. "It's him." Xiaoning pointed at the green-robed young man in the crowd and said in a deep voice, "He's the goo master." This was how there was a counter to everything in the world. The green-robed young man was extremely well hidden, and even Su Zimo could not find him. However, he could not escape Xiaoning's methods. "Hand over your life." In a flash, Su Zimo charged towards the green-robed youth with a murderous aura. The Emperor of Great Xia and the others retreated. The green-robed young man was not afraid at all. His eyes shone with a sinister green light as he took out a white-boned staff. With the help of his goo worms, his strength surged. The green-robed young man extended his white-boned staff and drew a dark green circle in front of him. Suddenly, a ferocious head flew out and bit towards Su Zimo. Su Zimo raised his brow. This dermic art gave him a sense of déjà vu. Without much thought, he conjured a scarlet flame with his backhand and enveloped the head in front of him. Immortal Tao Fire. Given Su Zimo's cultivation, he could mobilize dermic powers and release the Immortal Tao Fire with immense lethality that could incinerate many dermic arts. However, the head was not burned to ashes by the Immortal Tao Fire. Instead, it let out a series of furious roars. The head was lifelike with flesh and blood. Under the envelopment of the Immortal Tao Fire, his flesh was burned to the point where his skin and flesh were torn apart and blood oozed out with a foul stench. On the contrary, the Immortal Tao Fire's flames were reduced significantly. When he saw that, the green-robed young man was excited. He bit his tongue gently and spat out a stream of blood essence into the dark green circle. Hoo. The aura of the head expanded and evil blood splattered everywhere. Even the Immortal Tao Fire was showing signs of extinguishing. You still want to fight me in dermic techniques? Sneering coldly, Su Zimo conjured hand seals and Sanskrit rumbled in his consciousness. Another ball of flames appeared with a golden luster and fused into the Immortal Tao Fire instantly. Buddhist Tao Fire. The fusion of the two Tao Fires completely transformed into another dermic art. The power of the Dvyadi Tao Fire was more than double. Initially, the green-robed young man thought that he could kill Su Zimo with that dermic art. However, he did not expect that a single breath of the Dvyadi Tao Fire would incinerate the head in midair into ashes. Instantly, Su Zimo arrived before him. You! The green-robed young man was scared out of his wits and released his essence spirit secret skill without thinking. In his glabella, his spirit consciousness condensed into a lifelike goo worm that charged towards Su Zimo's glabella. If the goo worm could enter the other party's consciousness, it would be able to devour his essence spirit. Die! Su Zimo hollered with a cold expression. He did not even use his essence spirit secret skill and merely condensed his spirit consciousness to release a spirit consciousness attack. His essence spirit was tempered by the top-notch cultivation techniques of the immortal, Buddhist, and fiend sects, and his spirit consciousness was incomparably strong. Even the simplest spirit consciousness attack was enough to destroy the green-robed young man's essence spirit secret skill. The moment the goo worm appeared, it was shattered by Su Zimo's spirit consciousness. The green-robed young man grunted, and his essence spirit was shaken. The blood drained from his face as his body swayed, and he fell from midair. The reason why Su Zimo did not kill him directly was because he suddenly recalled where he had seen this familiar dermic art before. The former palace lord of Bloodcrow Palace. The remnant beast of the witch race whose body was destroyed by the Azura Yen Beichin and whose essence spirit escaped. The green glow in the green-robed young man's eyes was a phenomenon that would only appear when he cultivated the cultivation techniques of the witch race. Su Zimo wanted to keep the green-robed young man alive so that he could search the latter's soul. Uneasy thoughts bubbled in Su Zimo's mind. This crisis was most likely not targeted at Great Zhou. He wanted to confirm something. The green-robed young man's essence spirit was shaken and could not escape for the time being. He could only watch helplessly as Su Zimo walked over. Right then, a voice sounded. Fellow Taoist desolate marshal, you must not go overboard when killing. You should know when to stop. A white-haired old man appeared on the battlefield and shielded the green-robed young man behind him, exuding the might of a Dharma characteristic. Elder Sun had no choice but to step forward. He could even endure the death of a disciple of Dragon Tiger sect. However, this green-robed young man had an even stronger faction backing him, and he must not die. If anything were to happen to the green-robed young man, not only him, Dragon Tiger sect might face a catastrophe as well. Everyone's expressions changed when Elder Sun appeared. Dharma characteristic Tao Lord. At that cultivation realm, he could dominate the 4 dynasties. Furthermore, there were no more Dharma characteristic Tao Lords in the capital of Great Zhou. Here, Dharma characteristic Tao Lords were invincible existences. Su Zimo sneered, after waiting for so long. You're finally willing to show yourself? Elder Sun frowned. The reactions of the other cultivators were filled with shock, fear, and respect. He was extremely satisfied. However, Suzimo was the only one who looked normal, making him feel uncomfortable. Elder Sun took a deep breath and said in a deep voice, "Desolate Marshal, I can leave the rest to you to deal with. However, I have to take this person away." "Oh," Suzimo said indifferently, "I'm sorry, anyone can leave but this person." Elder Sun narrowed his eyes with a flash of killing intent. He had given Suzimo enough face by using that tone and attitude. Unexpectedly, Suzimo did not appreciate his kindness and was aggressive, pushing his luck. "Desolate Marshal, you have to think carefully." Elder Sun's tone turned cold as well. "I did not attack you merely out of respect for that senior in the Dragon Burial Valley. Right now, I'm going to take this person away. If you dare to stop me, don't blame me for being merciless." Elder Sun's meaning was simple. He would not take the initiative to attack Suzimo. However, if he were to leave and Suzimo wanted to stop and attack him, he could not be blamed for killing the latter despite the major cultivation realm difference between them. "I think there's something that you might not have understood." Suzimo shrugged his shoulders and said in a serious manner, "Let's not talk about him. Even you will have to seek my permission if you want to leave this place alive today." Chapter 1104. Chapter 1104. Shocking the Crowd. Fufufu. Elder Sun could not help but laugh. If Suzimo had said it casually, he would not have minded. However, when he saw how serious Suzimo was, Elder Sun felt that this was the funniest thing in the world. "Desolate Marshal, if you said that 10 years ago, it might have carried some weight." Elder Sun shook his head. "However, you've already lost supreme treasures such as the Divine Phoenix Bone and Creation Green Lotus. Do you still want to challenge me across a major cultivation realm?" Elder Sun truly could not tell what Suzimo's chances of winning were. Even if that lad's body was still strong, he could kill that lad on the spot as long as he used his Essence Spirit secret skill. With a calm expression, Suzimo lowered his gaze and glanced at the green-robed young man, saying indifferently, "No one can protect this person. If you insist, I'll kill you as well." That was a blatant threat and warning. Elder Sun's expression darkened and turned sinister in the blink of an eye. "You want to kill me? How?" He had fought countless battles in his life and was also a paragon back then. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been able to cultivate to the Dharma characteristic realm. Up till this point of his cultivation, he had never encountered such a situation. A void reversion actually dared to threaten a Dharma characteristic Tao Lord. This was practically a fantasy in the cultivation world. In other words, even if there was a 1 in a million chance that Suzimo retained his terrifying combat strength despite his crippled body and could defeat him, given his capabilities, it would still be extremely easy to escape from this place. Elder Sun could not understand how this brazen Tao being Desolate Marshal could claim to be able to kill him. Suzimo merely looked at Elder Sun calmly with a hint of pity in his eyes. Immediately after, Elder Sun noticed that the many cultivators opposite him widened their eyes in shock and fear. What was wrong? What was happening? Elder Sun's heart skipped a beat. He did not sense any danger at all. Suzimo stood opposite him motionlessly and did not attack. What were those cultivators shocked and fearful of? Unknowingly, Night Spirit had already vanished. By the time everyone realized, he was already behind Elder Sun. However, Elder Sun was oblivious. Night Spirit's figure was like a ghost as he stood up slowly from the ground. His body that was not considered burly was half a head taller than Elder Sun, and he revealed a pair of cold, narrow eyes. Pissed. When they saw that, the Emperor of Great Shang and the other void reversions gasped and felt their scalps prickle as their hairs stood on end. Nobody noticed where the black-robed man came from. Everything happened in silence. The black-robed man had already arrived behind Elder Sun and was only inches away from him. It was as though he had no breathing, pulse, or aura. Elder Sun did not notice it at all. If everyone present had not witnessed it personally, they would not have believed that there was someone standing behind Elder Sun, let alone Elder Sun himself. Everyone had different auras. Some of them were sharp, some were cold and feminine, while others were elegant and ethereal. However, the black man's aura was void. In other words, the cultivators present could not sense the existence of the black-robed man at all after closing their eyes. Even their spirit consciousnesses could not sense the direction of the black-robed man. That was way too terrifying. The green-robed young man's body trembled slightly as he looked at Night Spirit with a sense of trepidation. He could not help but remind with a quivering voice, Elder Son, behind you? Behind him? There was someone behind him. Elder Son was so scared that his heart almost exploded, and he was scared out of his wits. Right then, Suzimo waved it off. Kill him. Poof. Before Elder Son could do anything, a bloody hole appeared on his head with fresh blood oozing out. The essence spirit in his consciousness had already shattered. Night Spirit retracted his finger with a calm expression. He attacked so quickly that his fingers were not stained with any blood at all. Thump. Elder Son fell to the ground with his eyes widened in disbelief. Even in death, he did not know who killed him. A Dharma characteristic Tao Lord of Dragon Tiger sect died on the spot. The entire battlefield fell into complete silence. This scene was way too shocking for everyone. Night Spirit's attack was extremely simple. However, it was much more terrifying than Suzimo's earlier attacks. Dharma characteristic Tao Lords were considered the top existences in the 4 dynasties. Even in the entire cultivation world, they were considered to be powerful. Apart from patriarchs, they were only beneath conjoint bodies. It was said that when one cultivated to the Dharma characteristic realm, they would be able to create heaven and earth Dharma characteristics that could summon the wind and rain, overturn rivers and oceans. They could control the power of heaven and earth and dominate the world. But now, the Dharma characteristic Tao Lord of Dragon Tiger sect was stabbed to death by a single finger of the black-robed man before he could even release any techniques. What was the cultivation of this black-robed man? Which of the cultivators present would dare to resist if even Dharma characteristic Tao Lords could be killed? All the cultivators present were shocked and kept quiet out of fear. Suzimo nodded to Night Spirit. After more than 100 years, Night Spirit had grown even stronger. Even with his spirit consciousness, he could not sense Night Spirit's existence. However, Night Spirit could not escape from his spirit perception. Others might not be able to sense it, but he could vaguely sense that Night Spirit was probably at the Void Reversion realm as well. However, he did not know about Night Spirit's combat strength. Suzimo was increasingly curious about Night Spirit. Night Spirit was not human. However, there was no race in the entire demon race that could match Night Spirit in terms of potential. When he recalled the terrifying combat strength Night Spirit displayed in Myriad Phenomenon City, he could vaguely guess that Night Spirit's bloodline was at least on par with the God and Rakshasa race. Suzimo did not think too much about it. No matter what race Night Spirit was from, they were still brothers. He arrived before the green-robed young man and looked down with a cold gaze. Desolate Marshal, you better not touch me. You can't afford to offend the person backing me. Instead of begging for mercy, the green-robed young man said fiercely. The person backing you? Suzimo sneered. You're not a witch. As one of the primordial 9 races, the witch race won't be as weak as you. In other words, your witchcraft techniques were taught by others. The person who taught you probably isn't a true witch either but merely a remnant of the witch race. When he heard that, the green-robed young man's heart skipped a beat. At that point, even without searching the green-robed young man's soul, Suzimo had already guessed that the Palace Lord of Blood Crow Palace had returned. Extending his palm, Suzimo grabbed the green-robed young man's essence spirit and said coldly, even a true witch won't be able to protect you, let alone a remnant of the witch race. Desolate Marshal. The essence spirit of the green-robed young man shrieked. The witch race is one of the primordial 9 races. If you dare to offend the witch race, you'll be in deep trouble. Ha 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 ha. Suzimo reared his head in laughter. I, Desolate Marshal, have established my Tao. Now that I'm reborn, there's no one in this world who can threaten me or obstruct my Tao. Not the witch race, nor the primordial 9 races. Poof! He channeled strength into his palm, and killed the green-robed young man without any interest in soul-searching even. Chapter 1105, The Rainfall of Heaven. Chapter 1105, The Rainfall of Heaven. With the death of the green-robed young man, the faces of the Emperor of Great Shang and the others were ashen as though they had lost their parents. They were all implanted with goo worms, and now that the green-robed young man was dead, they would not live for long either. They had seen cultivators who were tortured to death by goo worms with their own eyes. It was truly excruciating. They did not even have the chance to escape with their essence spirits. Didao being desolate marshal, please show mercy and save us as well. The emperors of Great Shang and Great Yu pleaded with bitter, pitiful expressions. Dignity meant nothing as long as they could survive. Su Zimo turned slightly and looked at Xiaoning. He was helpless against goo worms as well. Pondering for a moment, Xiaoning said, I can save you guys as well. However, all of you have to make a vow to be loyal and serve the current Empress of Great Zhou. Su Zimo's eyes lit up when he heard that. The reason why he did not kill more than 200 nascent souls and the remaining void reversions was because he wanted to keep them as Ji Yaoshu as helpers. Su Zimo and Xiaoning exchanged glances and smiled. Although they had not seen each other for 100 years, the siblings were still telepathic. Although Ji Yaoshue did not say anything, her heart was filled with warmth. Sure. All the cultivators agreed without hesitation. They closed in and swore a Dao oath of lifetime loyalty to Ji Yaoshue in front of everyone. If they reneged on it, they would die on the spot. The three dynasties had almost sent out all of their forces to arrive here. But now, half of their forces had died here, and the other half had submitted to Ji Yaoshue. This meant that Ji Yaoshue could devour the other three dynasties and establish a new empire with this power. Right? Ji Yaoshue's heart skipped a beat as she suddenly recalled something with a grim expression. Something might have happened to Ethereal Peak. He's back? Su Zimo's gaze was cold as he said in a deep voice, the calamity of the goo worms, as well as the attack on Great Zhou, is him taking revenge. Him? Ji Yaoshue was stunned. Su Zimo replied, the former palace lord of Blood Crow Palace. Ji Yaoshue opened her mouth slightly in realization. She knew about the battle at Ethereal Peak as well. If the Azura Yin Baichen had not arrived, Ethereal Peak might have been destroyed. It was also after that battle when the old immortal Crane entered the Dharma characteristic realm that the Patriarch of Great Zhou decided to befriend Ethereal Peak and go against everyone's wishes to let Ji Yaoshue take over the position of the Empress. Su Zimo said, back then, the Palace Lord's body was destroyed by Brother Yin, but his essence spirit escaped far away. To think that he would make a comeback so quickly. At the side, with the help of Xiaoning's elixir, the goo worms in the body of the Emperor of Great Shang had already been expelled and burned to ashes. The Emperor of Great Shang was eager to curry favor and hurried over. He pointed to the green-robed young man's corpse and said, his master is an elder of Goo sect. His Dao title is Lone Soul. The goo worm calamity of the North region this time round was done by Dao Being Lone Soul. Right? I heard that Dao Being Lone Soul knows the cultivation techniques of the witch race and has already led his men to attack Ethereal Peak. The title Dao Being Lone Soul meant that the Palace Lord was still at the Void Reversion realm after more than 100 years. Of course, for Void Reversions, more than 100 years passed in the blink of an eye, and it was normal for their cultivation to not improve at all. An existence like Su Zimo was extremely rare after all. Furthermore, the Palace Lord only had his essence spirit left. If he were to assimilate a goo master whose body had a low compatibility rate with his essence spirit, it would be difficult for his cultivation to advance in the future. Su Zimo frowned and asked, apart from him, who else is attacking Ethereal Peak? Most of them are cultivators of Dragon Tiger sect. By then, the Emperor of Great Yu had already gotten rid of the threat of the goo worm as well. He hurried over and said, I heard that Dragon Tiger sect sent out 5 Dharma characteristic Dao Lords and hundreds of void reversions. As one of the 10 upper sects of the North region, Dragon Tiger sect was extremely powerful. Although it was far inferior to super sects such as the 9 immortal sects, it was not something that Ethereal Peak could contend against. Su Zimo's expression was cold and killing intent surged in his eyes. There was something else strange about this. He shifted his gaze and asked coldly, given Dao being Lone Soul's cultivation, identity, and status, it's unlikely for him to be able to mobilize Dragon Tiger Sect, right? Gu Sect was one of the 5 heretical doctrines. However, it had been a long time since a successor appeared, and they were ranked last among the 5 heretical doctrines. As a Void Reversion Gu Master, how could Dao being Lone Soul manage to mobilize Dharma-characteristic Dao Lords of Dragon Tiger Sect? That, I'm not sure. With an embarrassed expression, the Emperor of Great Yu said, however, it seems like there's an even nobler existence supporting Dao being Lone Soul. Suddenly, the Emperor of Great Shang said, that person's eyes are dark green and extremely strange. I merely exchanged glances with him and felt as though my soul was about to disperse. Dark green eyes. Su Zimo's heart stirred. Night Spirit walked over and said softly, it's someone from the witch race? The primordial 9 races. It was no wonder why Dao being Lone Soul could get Dragon Tiger Sect to help. It was no wonder why Dragon Tiger Sect was fearless and dared to take part in the fight between the 4 dynasties. It turned out that they had the backing of the witch race of the primordial 9 races. Am I going to meet with the primordial 9 races again so soon? Su Zimo's tone was cold. At the mention of the witch race, killing intent flashed through the depths of Night Spirit's eyes as well. I've got to get to Ethereal Peak. Su Zimo informed Ji Yaoxue. The Emperor of Great Shang and the others had already submitted to Ji Yaoxue, so she was safe. Right now, Ethereal Peak was the most important. I'll be fine. Hurry and go on. Be careful. Ji Yaoxue nodded. Just as Su Zimo was about to move, he frowned and asked Xiaoning, what about the black blood goo on the tens of millions of citizens in the capital of Great Zhou? There's nothing much I can do either. Xiaoning shook her head. We can only dissolve the 7 treasures blood transformation pill into water and distribute the spirit water as much as possible. This was an extremely massive project. It was almost impossible for tens of millions of citizens to be able to drink the spirit water of the 7 treasures blood transformation pill. Furthermore, the longer things dragged on, the more citizens would die because of the black blood goo. At that moment, Su Zimo leaped into the air and looked down. He could see that citizens were beginning to die in the capital, and it was quite chaotic. He pondered for a moment before saying, give me a 7 treasures blood transformation pill. Xiaoning handed a pill over. With a wave of his hand, Su Zimo gathered dermic powers and absorbed the waters of Jishui River that surrounded the capital endlessly, infusing the 7 treasure blood transformation pill within. Su Zimo waved his sleeves and scattered the river water in the skies, forming a torrential downpour that enveloped the entire capital. In various parts of the capital, some people who were poisoned by goo worms started to recover when they came into contact with the rainwater. Some people who were on the brink of death showed signs of revival. Gradually, countless citizens rushed out of their homes and drank the rain with excited expressions. It's the rain of heaven. The heavens have blessed us with rain. The heavens have eyes and sent down such an immortal rain to bless our great Zhou and ensure our safety. Countless citizens knelt and cried loudly. Chapter 1106, Return. Chapter 1106, Return. Manipulation of weather. In the eyes of mortals, this was an immortal technique. Furthermore, the rainwater could even revive the dead. In the hearts of mortals, this was a miracle. Looking at the many mortals kneeling beneath him with pious expressions, Su Zimo felt emotional. Unknowingly, more than 100 years had passed, and the young man who was no different from mortals in Pingyang Town had already reached this stage. Of course, given Su Zimo's cultivation realm, it was already his limit to be able to summon rain that could cover the entire capital of Great Zhou. The heavy rain lasted for 15 minutes before stopping. He returned to Xiaoning's side. I have to head to Ethereal Peak right now. I'll have to rely on you to deal with the goo worms in other parts of the North region. Ugh. Xiaoning nodded heavily. Brother, Don't worry. I'm in the capital right now. Even if I don't sleep or rest, I want to refine enough 7 treasure blood transformation pills. The 7 treasures blood transformation pill was a grade 5 elixir. Although there were many elixir refinement masters in the 4 dynasties, none of them could refine level 5 elixirs. The 7 treasures blood transformation pill could only be refined by Xiaoning, and no one could help her. This was a difficult and massive project. Ji Yaoxue made the arrangements quickly and said in a deep voice, "The moment Xiaoning refines any 7 treasures blood transformation pills, I'll send my cultivators to various places to send rain showers. I'll do my best to save as many as I can." "All right, I'll leave this place to you guys." Su Zimo did not linger and turned to leave. The situation at Ethereal Peak was bad, and he had to hurry over. "First, I'll go with you." Night Spirit followed him. Although the former did not say much, Su Zimo felt a sense of pride. If it was just the Dragon Tiger sect, he would be fearless as well. However, the witch race of the primordial 9 races was behind the goo worm disaster this time round. Su Zimo was not entirely certain if he could save Ethereal Peak after returning. However, with Night Spirit's help, they would have nothing to fear even if the primordial 9 races appeared in full force, let alone the witch race. "First, it's been many years since we last met. How's your speed now?" Night Spirit revealed a rare smile and was eager to try. He knew that Su Zimo was in a hurry, and that was the reason why he proposed to rush to Ethereal Peak. "Do you want to compete?" Su Zimo burst into laughter. His heart warmed, but he did not point out Night Spirit's intentions. Countless lightning snakes coiled around his body, and a pair of gigantic wings of dermic powers grew from his back. "Come on." The moment he said that, 2 figures disappeared from the spot with a bang, turning into 2 streaks of light that disappeared into the void in the blink of an eye. It was too fast. The crowd was speechless. Their movement techniques were probably even faster than Dharma characteristic Downlords. Ethereal Peak. The originally lush forest was now dyed red. Corpses of cultivators could be seen everywhere. Up till now, Ethereal Peak had already given it their all for this battle. The remaining Ethereal Peak cultivators had already retreated to the main peak of Ethereal Peak and were using the sect's final defensive formation to defend. The defensive formation was led by Sect Master Ling Yun and the other Void Reversions and formed a shimmering barrier around the main peak. At that moment, the light on the barrier had already dimmed significantly. If one focused their attention, they would see that there were already faint cracks on the barrier. Around the light barrier, more than 100 Void Reversions of the Dragon Tiger sect were unleashing waves of attacks. Bang, bang, bang. Many dermic arts and spirit weapons collided against the light barrier, causing ripples. Chi waves surged and dermic powers splattered everywhere. Shouts and curses could be heard one after another. In the main peak, many Chi refinement warriors, Foundation establishment cultivators, golden cores, and nascent souls of Ethereal Peak could only watch helplessly. There were worries, fears, and sorrows. Some cultivators with lower cultivation realms could not withstand the pressure and sobbed softly. The sound of every single collision caused their bodies to tremble. Most golden cores and nascent souls had never even seen such a grand formation in their lives, let alone Chi refinement warriors and Foundation establishment cultivators who were at the bottom of the sect. Everyone knew that as long as the formation was destroyed, all of them would be meat on the chopping block. Sect Master Ling Yun and the other Void Reversions who were in charge of the formation had ugly expressions. A streak of blood appeared at the corner of Ling Yun's mouth. They were at their limits. His gaze landed on the battlefield outside the formation. On another battlefield, Dragon Tiger Sect's 5 Dharma characteristic Downlords were attacking a crane and a golden-haired girl. The 5 Dharma characteristic Downlords were either at late stage or perfected Dharma characteristic realm. However, the crane was only at early stage Dharma characteristic realm. The golden-haired girl beside her had an even lower cultivation realm. She was only at the early stage Void Reversion realm. Furthermore, the girl seemed to have just entered the Void Reversion realm, and her aura was still unstable. Against the combined attacks of the 5 Dharma-characteristic Tao Lords of Dragon Tiger Sect, the Crane and the golden-haired girl managed to defend against wave after wave of attacks and entered a stalemate. The Crane had a massive body and relied on the innate divine powers of the demon race to move nimbly and engage 2 Dharma-characteristic Tao Lords of Dragon Tiger Sect. The golden-haired girl was even more powerful. Although she had just entered the Void Reversion realm, her blood chi surged and golden light filled the air as she single-handedly took on 3 Dharma-characteristic Tao Lords of the Dragon Tiger Sect. The girl was extremely beautiful and had exquisite features. Although she looked petite and weak, every single move she made was filled with immense power. If not for the fact that the Crane and the golden-haired girl were able to defend against the 5 Dharma-characteristic Tao Lords of Dragon Tiger Sect, Ethereal Peak's formation would have shattered if even a single Dharma-characteristic Tao Lord attacked. That gigantic Crane was Ethereal Peak's divine beast guardian. As for the golden-haired girl, she was Nian Qi, Su Zimo's former maidservant. Even though it was difficult to determine who was stronger on the battlefield, Ling Yun's eyes were filled with endless worry. Instinctively, his gaze landed on a dark green cloud outside the battlefield. There were 3 people standing on that cloud. One of them was the former Palace Lord of Blood Crow Palace who was now reincarnated as a Gu Master, Dao being Lone Soul. His return was also the reason for the calamity Ethereal Peak was facing this time round. If it was only Dao being Lone Soul, there was nothing to fear. What truly made Ling Yun's heart skip a beat were the other 2 people beside Dao being Lone Soul, a young man and an old man. The young man wore a dark green robe and his black hair draped over his shoulders. His eyes were dark green and were far deeper than Dao being Lone Soul. The young man was only at the Void Reversion realm. However, Dao being Lone Soul was respectful towards the young man. He stood beside the young man and lowered his hands with a humble expression, occasionally pointing at Ethereal Peak and saying something. The young man looked excited as though he was watching a show. An old man stood behind the young man. His face was filled with wrinkles and his eyes were blind. It was a pair of holes, and one could not tell his cultivation realm. Ling Yun had a feeling that those 2 were the truly troublesome ones. Chapter 1107, Young Master of the Witch Race. Chapter 1107, Young Master of the Witch Race. The Witch Race was one of the primordial 9 races. In the primordial era, they dominated Tianhuang mainland and enslaved the 10,000 races. As the young master of the Witch Race, Wu Li naturally had a noble status and was respected by all races. Unfortunately, he could not experience the honor as the young master of the Witch Race back in the Ghost Curse Tomb. As such, he felt extremely frustrated. The Ghost Curse Tomb was one of the 9 forbidden grounds of Tianhuang mainland. Apart from the people of the 9 races, any other race that entered would be mercilessly killed by the witches. It might seem like something extraordinary, but to Wu Li, it was extremely boring to be stuck in the Ghost Curse Tomb all day. It was like a well. The Tianhuang mainland outside was the vast sky. Everyone around him was from the Witch Race. He could not sense the thrill of looking down on Tianhuang mainland that was described in the ancient books when the Witch Race enslaved the 10,000 races. He could not experience the reverence and respect from the 10,000 races received by someone standing at the top. The witches were immersed in the glory of the past, and Wu Li was rather disdainful. It was a fact that they were defeated in the ancient war. The reason why the Witch Race resided in the Ghost Curse Tomb was because they were defeated in the past. That was nothing. At most, he would take back everything that they had lost in this era. This was not the only time Wu Li had this thought. He had the qualifications and potential. He was the young master of the Witch Race, the number 1 of the younger generation. He wanted to head out several times, but was stopped by the seniors of the Witch Race. Finally, he had a chance. About 10 years ago, a person appeared in the Ghost Curse Tomb. He was a remnant of the Witch Race and was almost killed by them. It was Dao being Lone Soul who was beside him. It was that person who made him realize that the decline of the human race in Tianhuang mainland was imminent. Finally, under his persistence, he left the Witch Race with Dao being Lone Soul. Uncle Lon, who had taken care of him for many years, was worried and followed them. To Wooly, Uncle Lon was way too cautious. Although he was at the Void Reversion Realm, with his combat strength, he could easily kill Dharma-characteristic Tao Lords across major cultivation realms. Even against conjoint body-mighty figures, he could escape with his many trump cards. There was no danger at all after leaving the Ghost Curse tomb. Furthermore, according to Tao being Lone Soul, there were no conjoint body-mighty figures among the 4 dynasties of the North region. After preparing for 10 years, the 3 of them left the Ghost Curse tomb. It was similar to what Tao being Lone Soul said. The humans of the 4 dynasties were way too weak. A single tiny goo worm could kill many humans. Wooly finally felt the thrill of looking down on the masses and controlling life and death. Under his orders, Tao being Lone Soul released goo worms continuously to wreak havoc in the North region. He was extremely excited when he saw countless humans struggling and screaming. Thereafter, the 3 of them visited Dragon Tiger sect personally. Just as Tao being Lone Soul had expected, although the Dragon Tiger sect was a human cultivation sect, they did not dare to disobey after knowing their identities. They were provided with many cultivators of the sect to control. Of course, there were also cultivators who objected during this period of time and were killed by him with ease. Recalling the Dharma-characteristic Tao Lord that died in his hands, Wooly could not help but reveal a cruel smile. It was way too awesome. It was a path of killing and bloodshed. Wooly was truly puzzled. How did weak, cowardly cultivators from such a lesser race win the ancient war? He looked at Ethereal Peak not far away and smirked coldly. This battle had already lasted for half a day. He did not attack the entire time and merely watched coldly from the sidelines. He was relishing this sensation. The cultivators on the main peak of Ethereal Peak were like ants, trembling in fear and struggling to survive under his gaze. The more fearful the group of cultivators were, the more excited he was. It was like a cat catching a mouse. If the mouse was bitten to death instantly, there would be no more fun. Of course, the battlefield was not entirely filled with ants. Interesting. Sticking out his tongue, Wooly licked his lips and looked at the golden-haired girl on the battlefield with a lustful glint in his eyes. To think that I would meet a girl with the bloodline of the god race here. This girl's god race bloodline is impure and she's only a remnant of the god race. The blind old man behind Wooly whispered. Tisk, TSK, TSK. Wooly smacked his lips. Look at that figure, that small waist and that appearance. It's truly perfect. No wonder everyone says that the god race is filled with handsome men and beautiful women. The ancients did not lie at all. This young lady from the god race has an impure bloodline and yet, she's so beautiful. Even I'm tempted. How could Tao being Lone Soul not understand Wooly's intentions when he heard that? He said hurriedly, that girl is merely a remnant of the god race and is the maidservant of Ethereal Peak's disciple, Su Zimo. You can definitely take her away, young master. Yes? Wooly nodded. Looking at the golden-haired girl who was still fighting on the battlefield, Wooly pursed his lips and a hint of impatience appeared in his eyes as he sighed gently. It's about time. Tao being Lone Soul's eyes lit up. This meant that Wooly was about to strike personally. That's enough. Wooly rose as though there was no gravity and floated slowly to the outskirts of the battlefield. He said indifferently, it's not an easy task that you guys were able to fight and last till now. Before he finished his sentence, he extended his finger and tapped gently in the direction of the crane. Initially, the old immortal crane used her innate divine powers and agile movement techniques to weave through the air. Even 2 Dharma-characteristic Tao Lords could not restrain her. All of a sudden, right after Wooly extended his finger, a dark green rope appeared strangely on her body. Ah! The old immortal crane lamented. The dark green rope had a strong corrosive power that ate away her wings instantly and dug into her flesh. The old immortal crane could sense that her body was about to be torn apart by the rope. She had never seen such a method before, and it was extremely strange. Even her innate divine power could not dodge it. The eyes of the 2 Dharma-characteristic Tao Lords lit up as they released Dharmic arts and struck the old immortal crane. Bang! Countless feathers fell. The old immortal crane's body collided heavily against the light barrier formed by Ethereal Peak's Sect Protection Formation. Snap! The barrier shattered. Sect Master Ling Yun and the other void reversions shuddered and spat out a mouthful of blood, looking dispirited instantly. The old immortal crane tried her best to maintain her consciousness and transformed into her human form, falling into the crowd so that she did not injure the sect disciples. However, she was first struck by witchcraft and then struck by two dermic arts head-on. She was severely injured and could no longer fight. If not for the fact that demons had strong physiques, she would have died. "Master!" Nianqi exclaimed when she saw that. The moment she was distracted, her situation turned extremely dangerous, and she was almost struck by the few Dharma-characteristic Tao Lords. "Give up, lest you suffer." Wuli walked towards Nianqi slowly and extended his palm, enveloping her with a sinister smile. "There's no need to struggle. It's all futile." Chapter 1108, Spirit Vanquishing Whip. Chapter 1108, Spirit Vanquishing Whip. Scram. When she saw the young master of the witch race charging over, Nianqi's expression was cold as she hollered and pushed her bloodline to its limits. Boom! With a loud bang, Nianqi's figure suddenly vanished. A tall and majestic pyramid appeared where she initially stood. It was ancient and mysterious, emitting golden rays of light with an unrestrained might. There were countless living beings that prostrated at the bottom of the pyramid. There were at least hundreds of millions of them, and there was no end in sight. Every single living being knelt on the ground with their palms pressed together and looked up at the pyramid that hung above their heads, chanting prayers with pious expressions. Golden threads condensed above the heads of those living beings endlessly and converged at the top of the pyramid. Standing there, Nianqi's golden hair danced and her eyes were deep as her aura rose continuously. A ball of dark green light revolved around Wu Li's palm, and he retracted it the moment he touched the pyramid. Pissed. In pain, Wu Li frowned slightly and flung his palm. God's jurisdiction. As the young master of the witch race, he naturally knew that this was a phenomenon of the god race's bloodline. The bloodline of the god race was terrifying, and almost every god race being could cultivate a bloodline phenomenon at a certain age. However, the girl in front of him had an impure bloodline and was merely a remnant of the god race. How could she cultivate God's jurisdiction? Furthermore, the aura of this God's jurisdiction was not inferior to a true god race being. Although the witch race was one of the primordial 9 races, their bloodline power was far inferior to the god race. The witch race was not good at melee combat. Wu Li sneered and retreated. The many witchcraft and curse techniques of the witch race were superior in that they were treacherous and impossible to defend against. You're just an arrow at the end of its flight. Let's see how long you can last. Wu Li conjured hand seals with both hands and chanted a series of strange words before shouting softly, "Skeleton mantra. Hoo hoo hoo." The moment the curse descended, 8 dark green skulls appeared beside Nianqi and turned into beams of dark light that charged towards the god's jurisdiction. Back then, the green-robed young man who died in Su Zimo's hands could only form a single skull. As for young Master Wu Li, he could release 8 of them instantly. That was the difference between them. When cultivated to its limit, this curse technique could release 9 skulls. If not for the protection of the god's jurisdiction, the 9 skulls would have been able to devour a cultivator's flesh with a few breaths. The god's jurisdiction shook continuously. Under the gnawing of the skulls, cracks appeared on the pyramid and it was about to collapse. Nianqi's face had already turned paler. Everyone from Ethereal Peak had grim expressions when they saw that. The destruction of the formation on the main peak was akin to adding fuel to the fire. All the disciples of Ethereal Peak were exposed to the killing power of more than 100 void reversions from Dragon Tiger Sect. Right then, a howl sounded. It was as loud as the clouds and contained an endless might that boomed like thunder. The old immortal crane shuddered. That howl seemed familiar. A bright glint shone in Nianqi's eyes. Before the howl ended, another howl followed. It was sharp and ear-piercing, like metal colliding. When the howl sounded, it was far away. By the time the cultivators glanced over instinctively, they could already see two figures rushing over. They came at lightning speed and were practically side by side. The person on the left wore green robes and his black hair danced in the wind. He had a cold expression and his eyes seemed to be burning with two balls of flames as his entire body shone with dazzling electric arcs. Zemo. The old immortal crane shuddered and her eyes shone with joy as she said softly, "Zemo is back." Who is Zemo? Apart from some elders of Ethereal Peak, most of the cultivators had never seen Su Zemo before. Sect Master Ling Yun was delighted as well. That's Su Zemo, who's currently known as Dao being Desolate Marshal. Desolate Marshal established his Dao. That's him. A series of exclamations came from the crowd. For the group of cultivators, they were more familiar with the Dao title Desolate Marshal. Who's that black-robed man beside him? A cultivator asked. Beside Su Zemo, there was a black-robed man traveling shoulder to shoulder with him. Their speeds were on par. The first howl came from Su Zemo. The second howl should have come from the black-robed man. The black-robed man had a sharp face and a cold expression. His eyes were as deep as the sea, and there was nothing special about him at first glance. However, anyone with sharp eyes would be able to tell that every single move of the black-robed man seemed to have been accurately measured. The old immortal crane looked lost as well. For some reason, the black-robed man gave her a familiar feeling. However, she knew that she had never seen him before. Among all the cultivators present, Nin Chi was the only one who had seen Night Spirit take on human form in Myriad Phenomenon City. It was natural that no one else could recognize him. One of the void reversions of Ethereal Peak sighed gently. Desolate Marshal is truly righteous to be able to stand out at such a critical juncture. Unfortunately, he's only at the void reversion realm. The void reversion did not continue, but everyone could tell what he meant. Given the current situation, even a Dharma characteristic Dao Lord would be useless, let alone a void reversion. Sect Master Ling Yun said in a deep voice, "You guys don't understand. Zemo is the #1 monster incarnate in history and is invincible among his peers. However, I heard that 10 years ago, Dao being Desolate Marshal's body was crippled by a half-martial ancestor and all his trump cards were gone. He's probably not even comparable to an ordinary void reversion right now." Ugh, a sigh sounded from the crowd. Sect Master Ling Yun's expression darkened, as well as he forced a smile. No matter what, one more person means that we'll have more strength. The old immortal crane nodded as well and made a decision. When Zemo arrives, we'll break out of the encirclement with all our might. We'll try our best to escape. It's you. Dao being Lone Soul recognized Su Zemo, and his expression turned excited instantly. He directed the void reversions of Dragon Tiger Sect and shouted, "The 10 of you, stop those two. Kill that black-robed man on the spot." After pausing for a moment, Dao being Lone Soul laughed sinisterly. "I want this green-robed man alive." From afar, Su Zemo was already burning with rage and killing intent when he caught sight of the blood-stained Ethereal Peak. When he was close, he did not have any intention of testing the waters or holding back. He channeled a mental technique and touched his glabella with his finger, opening up his spirit consciousness. Right after, in front of everyone, Su Zemo pulled out a whip that was dozens of feet long from his consciousness. It was a whip made entirely of countless lightning bolts. Dazzling electric arcs coiled around it and let out a series of crackling sounds. Around the whip, electric snakes danced and the entire void trembled. Spirit Vanquishing Whip, the Essence Spirit secret skill of the Great Void Spirit Refinement section. The reason why Zephyr Thunder Palace spared no effort and was willing to use a titular disciple to kill Su Zemo and retrieve the Purple Thunder Manual was because they would be able to obtain the Essence Spirit secret skill after fusing 2 cultivation techniques. This was also the Essence Spirit secret skill of the Thunder Emperor that dominated the world back then. One could imagine how powerful it was. Chapter 1109, Soul Dispersion. Chapter 1109, Soul Dispersion. Standing in midair, Su Zimo was surrounded by the power of thunder. He was like a thunder god that looked down on the masses from the clouds. Waving his whip, he whipped a void reversion. Piak. The void reversion paused and his eyes dimmed. Suddenly, he fell from midair and his life force dissipated. He was dead. The spirit vanquishing whip danced and whipped towards another void reversion. The void reversion released a dermic art right away and charged forward. Piak. A crisp sound was heard when the spirit vanquishing whip collided with the dermic art. The void reversion shuddered and fell as well. Before he could land on the ground, the void reversion had already died. The spirit vanquishing whip danced and whipped towards another void reversion. The void reversion did not dare to be careless and hurriedly took out dermic weapons, protection talismans, and other treasures to protect himself. Piak. The spirit vanquishing whip landed on that person's defensive dermic weapon. That person's head tilted, and he fell from midair as well. Although there were no injuries on his body, his essence spirit was destroyed and his soul was dispersed. The spirit vanquishing whip specialized in attacking essence spirits. If one's essence spirit cultivation was not high enough, there was only a single outcome. If they were struck by the spirit vanquishing whip, they would be reduced to ashes. Be it dermic arts or ordinary defensive dermic weapons, none of them could defend against the spirit vanquishing whip. That was the terror of the spirit vanquishing whip. Furthermore, compared to other essence spirit secret skills, the spirit vanquishing whip was much more agile in Su Zimo's hands and could be used as he wished. This scene caused an uproar. Nobody expected that 3 void reversions would die in the blink of an eye. They could not even get close to Su Zimo, let alone capture him alive. Dao Being Lone's soul gulped and looked at the lightning whip in Su Zimo's hands with lingering fear. The moment he saw Su Zimo, his adrenaline surged and he almost attacked personally. Now that he thought about it, it was fortunate that he did not step forward. If he was struck by that whip, his essence spirit would not even have the chance to leave his body and his soul would be destroyed on the spot. The ethereal peak cultivators were stunned. Wasn't it said that Dao Being Desolate Martial's combat strength was greatly reduced after his body was destroyed and he had fallen from grace to become a commoner? What was going on? The crowd was dumbfounded. Although everyone was confused, no matter what, it was a good thing. Dao Being Desolate Martial is so strong. I hope that the black-robed man who came with him won't be a burden to him. Some cultivators whispered worriedly. Right then, another cultivator exclaimed softly with a lost expression and asked instinctively, "Strange, why is that black-robed man missing?" It was only then that the group of cultivators realized that the black-robed man who was initially standing shoulder to shoulder with Su Zimo had vanished into thin air. Nobody saw where he went. Even the old immortal crane did not notice how the black-robed man disappeared. She was merely distracted for a moment, and it seemed as though Su Zimo was the only one left on the battlefield. However, the old immortal crane was a Dharma characteristic expert after all. Furthermore, she was a demon and had sharp senses. Although her spirit consciousness could not sense the existence of the black-robed man, she could vaguely sense that he was still on the battlefield. At that moment, of the 10 void reversions that charged forward, 3 were killed by the spirit vanquishing whip and 7 were left. All of a sudden, a blurry black shadow appeared between 2 void reversions. All the cultivators were fixated on the battlefield and exclaimed when they saw that. Before they could finish their exclamations, the blurry black figure disappeared once more. The heads of the 2 void reversions were crushed, and their essence spirits were destroyed. Their headless corpses fell from midair and died on the spot. It was too fast. Even with countless eyes watching the battlefield, no one could see how Night's spirit attacked. "All of you, die." Su Zimo swung the spirit vanquishing whip repeatedly in midair. Piak. Piak, piak. Every time the spirit vanquishing whip sounded, a void reversion would definitely fall from midair and his soul would dissipate along with his body. It was way too scary. Void reversion Tao beings could not defend against the spirit vanquishing whip at all. In the blink of an eye, 2 of the 10 void reversions that charged forward were killed by Night Spirit, and the remaining 8 had their essence spirits destroyed by the spirit vanquishing whip. Although there were more than 90 void reversions left in the Dragon Tiger sect, and they had the advantage in numbers, their faces were filled with fear. No one dared to advance recklessly. Up till this point of their cultivation, they had never seen such domineering methods. No matter who it was that rushed forward with dermic arts or weapons, they died on the spot if they were struck by the spirit vanquishing whip. It's an essence spirit secret skill. A Dharma characteristic Tao Lord of Dragon Tiger sect recognized the nature of the spirit vanquishing whip with his discerning eyes. After Wooly attacked, the 5 Dharma characteristic Tao Lords of Dragon Tiger sect wanted to take a breather and consume elixirs to rest. To think that 10 void reversions of the sect would die in the blink of an eye. They could only step forward. 2 Dharma characteristic Tao Lords flashed and pounced towards Suzimo. Everyone from Ethereal Peak felt their hearts skip a beat. Killing a void reversion was one thing, but facing a Dharma characteristic was another. At that moment, the cultivators had even forgotten about the old immortal Crane's previous decision and did not take the opportunity to escape. Instead, they looked at the battlefield instinctively. Suzimo's gaze was cold as he swung the spirit vanquishing whip and whipped it viciously. Essence Spirit Secret Skill. A Dharma characteristic Tao Lord roared and released his Essence Spirit Secret Skill at the same time. His spirit consciousness condensed and smashed forward viciously. Bang! The 2 Essence Spirit Secret Skills collided with a loud bang. Ah! The Dharma characteristic Tao Lord shuddered and cried out in pain. Suzimo's spirit consciousness was already comparable to Dharma characteristic Tao Lords. Coupled with the Essence Spirit Secret Skill of the Thunder Emperor, the lethality was shocking. Although the Dharma characteristic Tao Lord did not die, there was a burnt mark on his essence spirit. His essence spirit was injured. Of course, under the impact of the Dharma characteristic Tao Lord's essence spirit secret skill, the light of the spirit vanquishing whip dimmed and many lightning arcs dissipated. Another Dharma characteristic Tao Lord noticed that the situation was bad and immediately activated his essence spirit secret skill. The spirit vanquishing whip trembled. Boom! 2 essence spirit secret skills collided. The second Dharma characteristic Tao Lord let out a tragic cry as well. A scar appeared on his essence spirit as though it was whipped by a whip. The spirit vanquishing whip only truly dissipated after the impact of 2 essence spirit secret skills from 2 Dharma characteristic Tao Lords. The 2 Dharma characteristic Tao Lords suffered injuries on their essence spirits that might never be able to recover in the future. Both of them glared at Suzimo fiercely and channeled all their anger towards him, wanting nothing more than to tear him into pieces. Desolate Marshal, I don't care who's backing you. A Dharma characteristic Tao Lord said sternly, I'm going to grind your bones into dust right now. Dragon Tiger sect cultivators cultivated the Dragon Tiger Sutra and had strong physiques and shocking bloodlines. They were good at melee combat. The 2 Dharma characteristic Tao Lords flashed and charged towards Suzimo with torrential killing intent. You guys think you can kill me? When the spirit vanquishing whip dissipated, Suzimo's dermic powers were boiling. There was no fear in his eyes. Instead, 2 balls of flames burned, as though they wanted to incinerate all living beings. Chapter 11:10 Reduced to Ashes. Chapter 11:10 Reduced to Ashes. Swoosh. Suzimo conjured a dermic art and 3 balls of flames of different colors appeared around him. Red, Immortal Tao Fire. Golden, Buddhist Tao Fire. Black, Fiend Tao Fire. Suzimo willed. The 3 balls of flames collided rapidly and turned into a tricolored flame, forming the most terrifying dermic art in the Scarlet Flame Heart Sutra, Samadhi Tao Fire. Back when Extreme Fire was at the Void Reversion realm, he relied on the Samadhi Tao Fire to dominate his peers and was almost invincible. However, the Samadhi Tao Fire was even more powerful in Suzimo's hands. The expressions of the two Dharma-characteristic Tao lords that charged forward changed when they sensed the temperature of the tricolored flame. Initially, the two of them did not take the dharmic art of avoid reversion seriously. In their minds, the dharmic art of avoid reversion could be easily defeated with their bodies and blood chi. However, when the tricolored flame was formed, both of them felt their hearts skip a beat. It was extremely dangerous. That flame could definitely threaten their lives. A thin layer of sweat appeared on their faces after the Samadhi Tao fire descended. The two of them did not dare to be careless and retracted their contempt. Immediately, they summoned their defensive dharmic weapons. At the same time, they conjured dharmic arts and conjured dharmic barriers to defend themselves. Burn it! Su Zimo pointed forward with a murderous aura. The Samadhi Tao fire charged towards the two Dharma-characteristic Tao lords. When he saw that the two Dharma-characteristic Tao lords were using dharmic arts and dharmic weapons to defend as well, ruthless glint flashed through Su Zimo's eyes as his consciousness opened up. Another red beam tore through the air and entered the Samadhi Tao fire instantly. This was the Essence Spirit Tao fire. Initially, Su Zimo had no intention of releasing his Essence Spirit Tao fire. Although the Spirit Vanquishing Whip was powerful, it had a clear toll on his Essence Spirit as well. After releasing his Essence Spirit Tao fire, his Essence Spirit would become considerably weaker. However, seeing that the two Dharma-characteristic Tao lords were on high alert and were using their trump cards, the Samadhi Tao fire alone might not be able to burn them to death. After all, there was a major cultivation realm difference between them. That was the reason why he was determined to kill the two Dharma-characteristic Tao lords on the spot at all costs. Although it was only a single Essence Spirit Tao fire, it was able to fuse into the Samadhi Tao fire and form a Kacharati Tao fire. This was another transformation. Its power had more than doubled. Back in the Tao inheritance ground, Su Zimo had relied on his Kacharati Tao fire to gain the upper hand and almost burn Di-In to death. The Kacharati Tao fire descended. There was even a strange silence on the battlefield. The blind old man who was initially standing far away was shocked as well. Suddenly, he turned around and the sockets on his face glared in Su Zimo's direction. Even he felt his heart skip a beat, let alone the Dharma-characteristic Tao lords of the human race. How was that possible? How could a human cultivator at the void reversion realm release such a terrifying dharmic art? When the Kacharati Tao fire was formed, the two Dharma-characteristic Tao lords were shocked, and it was too late for them to dodge. Flames burst into the skies and engulfed both of them in the blink of an eye, forming two gigantic human-shaped fireballs. Their dharmic arts were instantly burned into nothingness in the face of the Kacharati Tao fire without creating any impact. The two of them opened their mouths and let out a tragic cry. But soon, the screaming stopped. Under the gazes of the crowd, the mouths and noses of the two Dharma-characteristic Tao lords spewed flames that were terrifying. In the blink of an eye, their flesh and blood were burned to ashes. Back then, even Di-Yin's body could not withstand the Kacharati Tao fire. Although the two of them were Dharma-characteristic Tao lords, their physiques and bloodlines were way inferior compared to Di-Yin, who was at the void reversion realm. Furthermore, after 10 years, Su Zimo's cultivation had improved, and the might of his Kacharati Tao fire had increased as well. Not to mention their flesh and blood. Even their Tao Lord dharmic weapons were burned red by the flames of the Kacharati Tao fire. In just 2 or 3 breaths, they had already begun to melt, forming a torrential red molten metal that dripped down from midair. The only thing left in midair was the boiling molten metal. In just 3 breaths, 2 Dharma-characteristic Tao lords were burned to ashes by the flames of the Kacharati Tao fire, and their essence spirits could not escape. Even everyone from Ethereal Peak was scared out of their wits, let alone the cultivators of Dragon Tiger sect. That scene was way too shocking. If that flame landed on the main peak of Ethereal Peak, all of them, including the main peak, would be reduced to ashes. However, the battle was not over. Worley, who was initially attacking Yin Qi, frowned slightly as well and heaved a sigh of relief with a hint of fear in his eyes. Thankfully, he was not against that person. Even with his capabilities, he could not defend against that ball of flames. The good thing was that such dermic arts required a lot of dermic powers and took a huge toll on one's essence spirit. If that person released it once, he would definitely not be able to release it a second time within a short period of time. Just as that thought flashed through Wu Li's mind, a warning rang in his mind, and he felt his scalp tingle as though he was targeted by an extremely terrifying existence. Not good. Instantly, Wu Li's heart felt as though it was about to explode. At that moment, a cry sounded from the crowd. A blurry black figure appeared behind Wu Li, narrowing his eyes with a cold expression. Night Spirit reached out and grabbed Wu Li's head viciously. Nobody could capture Night Spirit's tracks. By the time he appeared, he was already behind Wu Li. At that moment, it was too late even if Wu Li wanted to dodge. All of a sudden, a jade pendant on Wu Li's waist shattered, and a dark green barrier of light enveloped his body. Protection Dermic Weapon. The Protection Dermic Weapon activated automatically when Wu Li was attacked. Night Spirit's palm landed on the barrier. Crack, crack, crack. Cracks appeared on the barrier. Sharp claws popped out from Night Spirit's fingertips one after another. In just a brief moment, 5 holes appeared on the light barrier. When he saw that, Wu Li shrieked and withdrew a white bone staff before retreating. Night Spirit did not give him a chance to escape at all. With a cold gaze, he seized the opportunity and followed closely behind. The Protection Dermic Weapon had already shattered. One more attack, and he would be able to kill this witch completely. Killing Curse. Right then, a hoarse voice sounded. Suddenly, a dark green word appeared before Night Spirit kill. At that critical moment, the blind old man attacked. It was only when he attacked that the crowd realized that he was a Dharma characteristic expert. The Dharma characteristic experts of the witch race were comparable to conjoint body mighty figures. The word kill seemed to contain an extremely strange and terrifying power as it charged towards Night Spirit. Night Spirit's gaze turned cold as he stopped in his tracks. In a flash, he disappeared once more. Chapter 11:11 Harvested. Chapter 11:11 Harvested. With a pale face, Wu Li fled to the side of the blind old man and gripped his white bone staff tightly. He held a talisman in his left hand and released his massive spirit consciousness to scan the battlefield with a bewildered expression. He had never experienced something like this ever since he started cultivating. He had truly sensed the aura of death earlier on. The most frightening thing was that he felt as weak as an ant in front of the black-robed man, as though he would be torn apart the next moment. In Wu Li's eyes, the aura of the black-robed man was even more terrifying than Dao being desolate martial. Who is he? Wu Li was tense as he surveyed his surroundings and asked instinctively. Although the blind old man did not have eyes, he possessed spirit consciousness and could understand every single change in the battlefield. At that moment, he said slowly with a grim expression, "He's not human." "Not human?" Shocked, Wu Li asked again, "What do you mean by not human? He's a demon?" Pausing for a moment, he denied immediately, "Impossible. There's no demon that can release that aura from him." The blind old man remained silent. Right then, a change happened on the battlefield. Everyone instinctively thought that Night Spirit would launch another attack against Wu Li. However, to think that Night Spirit would appear beside a Dharma characteristic of Dragon Tiger sect the next time he appeared. Poof! The Dharma characteristic Dao Lord reacted, and had just raised his arm when his head was crushed by Night Spirit. His essence spirit was destroyed and he died on the spot. The blind old man was moved. This black-robed man was practically the embodiment of slaughter. Every single time he appeared, every single move he made had a single goal, to kill. Everyone present seemed to be his prey. The aura exuding from the black-robed man seemed to be able to awaken the ancient fear in his bloodline as a witch. Su Zimo could also kill Dharma characteristic Dao Lords across major cultivation realms. However, Night Spirit seemed even more relaxed and carefree. It did not mean that Night Spirit was definitely stronger than Suzimo in terms of combat strength. It could only be said that Night Spirit was superior in terms of killing methods. In the blink of an eye, only 2 of the 5 Dharma characteristic Tao Lords were left. One of the Dharma characteristic Tao Lords was so enraged that his eyes almost popped out. Blood chi burst forth from his body as he swung a gigantic stone axe towards Night Spirit's head. Night Spirit moved gently and arrived behind the Dharma characteristic Tao Lord in a flash, without much movement. The other Dharma characteristic Tao Lord saw that the situation was bad and hurriedly swung his saber, slashing towards Night Spirit's body. Without turning back, Night Spirit's body swayed and he disappeared once more. The Dharma characteristic Tao Lord was alarmed and retracted his saber instinctively, swinging it around him continuously. He released all his blood chi, afraid that Night Spirit would get close to him. However, Night Spirit did not appear at all. To be precise, before Night Spirit even attacked, the 2 Dharma characteristic Tao Lords had already broken out in cold sweat and were panting. Not far away, a tragic cry sounded from the Void Reversion crowd of Dragon Tiger sect. Night Spirit had appeared there. With his physique and killing techniques, he was like a tiger among a flock of sheep. Even Dharma characteristic Tao Lords would be doomed if they were closed in, let alone Void Reversions. In the blink of an eye, 7 to 8 Void Reversions died in Night Spirit's hands. Many Void Reversions retaliated, but they could not even touch the corner of Night Spirit's clothes. Instead, they injured cultivators of their own sect, and it was a mess. What Night Spirit displayed was not merely frightening killing methods. He also had absolute control over the situation. Ever since he appeared and killed 2 Void Reversions, he attacked Wu Li and saved Nian Qi. Unexpectedly, he changed his target and killed another Dharma characteristic Tao Lord. He merely fought against the remaining 2 Dharma characteristic Tao Lords for a moment before reappearing in the crowd of Void Reversions. Nobody knew his next move. Nobody could stop him from killing. Everyone was being led by the nose by him. As long as Night Spirit disappeared, everyone present would be on tenterhooks. The remaining 2 Dharma characteristic Tao Lords of Dragon Tiger sect heaved a sigh of relief when they saw Night Spirit charging towards the Void Reversion of the sect. At least for now, they were safe. The 2 of them exchanged glances. They could tell each other's intentions. Both of them had the intention to retreat. Right then, another voice sounded in their ears. Since you dare to come to Ethereal Peak to kill, don't even think about returning alive. Suzimo took the opportunity to arrive beside the 2 Dharma characteristic Tao Lords and said coldly, "Stay and accompany them in death." Kill. Almost at the same time, the 2 Dharma characteristic Tao Lords turned around and hollered. One of them raised the gigantic axe in his hands, while the other waved the saber in his hands and slashed down viciously at Suzimo. Ruthlessness surged in Suzimo's eyes. Without dodging or avoiding, he reached out with both hands and grabbed towards the incoming axe and saber. Everyone from Ethereal Peak was shocked. Was he crazy? A Void Reversion was actually using his body to fight against Tao Lord Dermic weapons. If this was before, the cultivators might be able to accept this scene, albeit with a hint of skepticism. After all, Suzimo was known as the #1 monster incarnate in history with a divine item like the Divine Phoenix Bone. He had a strong physique and was invincible in melee combat. He had never tasted defeat before. However, his body was already destroyed by a half-martial ancestor 10 years ago. The eyes of the 2 Dharma characteristic Tao Lords shone brightly with ecstasy. Tao being desolate martial was way too arrogant. Although their dermic weapons were not of high quality and were supreme grade with 4 dermic patterns, they were still Tao Lord dermic weapons after all, and were not something that Void Reversions could defend against. Bang! Bang! The saber and axe descended and collided with Suzimo's palm. However, there was no blood splatter. Instead, there was a dull sound of defeat. The pupils of the 2 Dharma characteristic Tao Lords constricted. Against their dermic weapons, Suzimo's palm was completely intact. Su Zimo's skin was made from the lotus leaves of the creation green lotus. Even supreme-grade Tao Lord Dermic weapons could not hurt him. Of course, although he could defend against the sharpness of the Tao Lord Dermic weapons, the power of the Dharma characteristic realm surged into his body and caused his body to experience quite a shock. His blood chi surged and his organs were in turmoil. Su Zimo let out a dull grunt. He could have avoided the attack of the two Dharma characteristic Tao Lords with his movement technique. However, if that was the case, it would take a few more rounds before he could kill them. Su Zimo did not wish to drag things. He wanted to kill the two Dharma characteristic Tao Lords right away. Die. After receiving the dermic weapons of the two Dharma characteristic Tao Lords barehanded, Su Zimo said coldly, he did not give the two of them another chance to attack. A gigantic pitch-black scythe had already appeared behind the two of them, exuding a cold and sinister aura. The heavenly fiend scythe. The moment Su Zimo charged over, that dermic art was already formed. With a single thought from Su Zimo, the pitch-black gigantic scythe was yanked towards the throats of the two Dharma characteristic Tao Lords. Two gigantic heads flew up and blood gushed out from their necks. In midair, endless fiend chi invaded the consciousnesses of the two heads, destroying their essence spirits on the spot as well. The lives of the two Dharma characteristic Tao Lords were like weeds that were harvested by the heavenly fiend scythe. Chapter 11:12. I'll kill you first. Chapter 11:12. I'll kill you first. In the blink of an eye, the five Dharma characteristic Tao Lords of Dragon Tiger sect were dead. In fact, a surreal feeling rose in the hearts of the ethereal peak cultivators. Dharma characteristic Tao Lords were like untouchable mountains in their hearts that crushed every single cultivator. But now, all five of them were dead. The remaining 90-odd void reversions of Dragon Tiger sect were also decreasing rapidly under Night Spirit's massacre. OL start equals 80, 53. Initially, there were more than 100 void reversions in the Dragon Tiger sect. However, only half of them were left now. Furthermore, the remaining half was already a mess and could not defend against Night Spirit's attacks. Every time a black shadow flashed, one or two void reversions would die. It was like chopping vegetables. The ethereal peak cultivators were dumbfounded. Initially, there were cultivators who were worried that the black-robed man would drag Su Zimo down. Now, they finally realized how terrifying this black-robed man was. No matter how strong a cultivator's mental fortitude was, they could not withstand a terrifying existence like Night Spirit, and some of them had already broken down mentally. After the five Dharma characteristic Tao Lords died, the remaining void reversions shouted and fled, no longer daring to linger in ethereal peak. Night Spirit turned and looked at Su Zimo instinctively. Chase after them. Su Zimo looked at Dao Being Lone Soul, Wu Li and the blind old man coldly and said, "Leave the three of them to me. Be careful." After saying that, Night Spirit's figure flashed and disappeared once more. A void reversion was speeding at full speed when he suddenly felt a breeze behind him. Before he could react, he felt a pain in his head and lost consciousness. Night Spirit passed by him without stopping at all. After resting for a while, Nian Qi came to Su Zimo's side with joy in her eyes. However, she knew that it was inappropriate for them to catch up in the current situation. As such, she merely said in a deep voice, "Young master, be careful. Those two are from the witch race, and they have strange methods." Right now, Nian Qi was the only one from Ethereal Peak who could still fight. Even if the other cultivators were not injured, they were not qualified to participate in this battle. Leave that Dao Being Lone Soul behind later. Don't kill him yet. Su Zimo sent a voice transmission with his spirit consciousness. Although she was puzzled, Nian Qi still nodded. Although they were all remnants, Nian Qi's combat strength was much stronger than Dao Being Lone Soul. The blind old man's eyes were hollow as he looked at Su Zimo with a pair of black holes, looking extremely strange. In reality, he was already regretting it. If he had known earlier, he would have left this place with Wu Li right away. However, He had not expected that the remaining 3 Dharma-characteristic Tao Lords would be dead on the spot after a moment of hesitation. Of course, it did not mean that he was afraid of Tao being Desolate Marshal. Although this lad's combat strength was strong, it was not enough to threaten him. The fact that Desolate Marshal was able to kill Dharma-characteristic Tao Lords across major cultivation realms was under ordinary circumstances. However, he was from the Primordial 9 races. Dharma-characteristic Tao Lords of the Primordial 9 races could fight against conjoint body mighty figures of the human race. The one the blind old man was truly of was the black-robed man who had already left to hunt down the void reversions of Dragon Tiger sect. For some reason, the aura of the black-robed man gave him a sense of trepidation. It had been a long time since he felt that way. Even against other races of the Primordial 9 races, he would not feel that way. Furthermore, the black-robed man was only at the void reversion realm. Just what is he? The blind old man faced Su Zimo while pondering about Night Spirit's identity. Thankfully, the black-robed man had already left and was not here. Otherwise, it would be troublesome for him to join forces with Tao being Desolate Marshal. Desolate Marshal, I'm the young master of the witch race. Hurry and kneel down. Recovering his composure, Wooly gripped his white bone staff and hollered with an arrogant expression. After he left the Ghost Curse tomb and entered the North region, no one dared to disobey him along the way. Even when he visited Dragon Tiger sect, the conjoint body mighty figures had to be respectful towards him. The young master of the witch race had a noble status. Even if he were to enter the Immortal, Fiend, and Buddhist sects, they would have to greet him respectfully, let alone Dragon Tiger sect. In Wu Li's eyes, although Su Zimo was strong, he was merely a slightly stronger ant. How dare an ant challenge him? At the mention of the word witch, a commotion broke out within Ethereal Peak. The Primordial 9 races. They were legendary existences that ruled over the primordial era. 100 years ago, a remnant of the witch race caused chaos in the Great Zhou dynasty. At that time, all the cultivators were wary and nobody dared to attack him. Now that a young master of the witch race had arrived, who would dare to hurt him? They thought about the catastrophe 10,000 years ago. Because of the death of a young dragon, the great Qin Empire that dominated the entire North region was reduced to ruins overnight. The massive empire collapsed in an instant. Even 2 Buddhist monasteries vanished into the past. The person before them had an even nobler identity than the young dragon back then. Even if he stood there motionlessly, no one would dare to hurt him. So amazing. Su Zimo sneered. I've killed beings of the god and Rakshasa race before. What's so amazing about the witch race? The blind old man said indifferently, Desolate Marshal, I'm not exaggerating. If any of you dare to hurt him, all living beings of the Great Zhou dynasty will have to die with him. The hearts of the Ethereal Peak cultivators skipped a beat. Even the old immortal crane felt immense pressure, let alone them. Normally, as long as Wooly revealed his identity, even conjoint body mighty figures and Mahayana patriarchs might not dare to attack him. Unfortunately, they were facing Su Zimo, not anybody else. He was someone who did not fear heaven and earth nor ghosts and deities. Up till this point of his cultivation, he had encountered countless dangers and oppression. However, had he ever compromised or retreated? Old thing, how dare you threaten me? Killing intent surged in Su Zimo's heart, and his gaze was like lightning as he shouted, I must kill him today. If you dare to take revenge on the innocent living beings of the Great Zhou dynasty, I'll kill my way into your lair and annihilate your entire race one day. Pissed. The crowd gasped. They did not even dare to think about saying something like that. Why you? How dare you? The blind old man's voice was trembling. In the ancient era, even with the dominance and invincibility of the human emperor, he did not exterminate the primordial 9 races completely and merely drove them into an area. But today, a cultivator of the human race had appeared and declared that he wanted to destroy the witch race. Not to mention how great his future accomplishments would be, his boldness was unparalleled. Killing intent surged in the blind old man's heart. I can't let that lad live. A thought crossed the blind old man's mind. If he grows up, he might become another human emperor. He might even be more terrifying than the human emperor. The moment the blind old man wanted to kill, Suzimo's spirit perception sensed it. How dare you harbor killing intent towards me? Suzimo said coldly, Old thing, I'll kill you first. Chapter 11:13, Illusionary Curse. Chapter 11:13, Illusionary Curse. Lightning crackled around Suzimo's body as his wings of dermic powers flapped. In a flash, he lunged towards the blind old man at an extremely fast speed. The witch race was one of the primordial 9 races and possessed a noble bloodline. However, their bodies were relatively weak and were far inferior compared to the bodies of the god and dragon race. What the witch race specialized in was penetrative, unpredictable, and terrifying sorcery. Although Suzimo's Green Lotus true body did not have a strong bloodline, his physique was tough and even Dao Lord Dermic weapons could not shake it. Therefore, he intended to fight the blind old man in melee combat. In reality, this battle would have been much simpler if it was his dragon true body. As long as he could close the distance, be it using his body, bloodline power, or Baron, he would be able to deal immense damage to the blind old man. You must have a death wish. While Suzimo was fast, the blind old man's reaction was even faster. Although he was blind, his ears became sharper as a result. Coupled with his massive spirit consciousness, he had already sensed Suzimo's movements long ago. The blind old man slapped his storage bag and a white bone staff appeared in his palm. Above the rod was a menacing skull. The blind old man's staff paused gently on the ground as he chanted a series of strange incantations. Hoo. Suddenly, 9 skulls appeared in midair and charged towards Suzimo. Skeleton Curse. The skeleton curse released by the blind old man was even stronger than the young master of the witch race. Suzimo did not dare to be careless as Sanskrit rumbled in his consciousness. Om. Ma. And I. Pa. Suddenly, Suzimo opened his mouth and spat out 4 Sanskrit words that were deafening. At the same time, he conjured hand seals. Bang. Boom. Boom. Dermic seals descended from the skies one after another and shone with a golden light, suppressing the incoming skulls. Finally, Suzimo condensed a dermic seal and stood firm, as though he was rooted to the ground. The daming mantra combined with the 4 daming dermic seals burst forth instantly. Eventually, Suzimo ended it with the immovable foundation seal. The daming mantra was a sound domain secret skill and had always been successful. However, even after the Sanskrit sounds descended, the blind old man seemed to be completely unaffected. The skulls that was flying in midair merely paused for a moment before continuing to speed forward. The 3 Buddhist dermic seals, the Fiend Suppression Seal, Immortal Trap Seal, and Demon Subduing Seal, descended and were locked in a stalemate with 3 skulls for a moment. As for the remaining 6 skulls, they had already pounced on Suzimo and were chomping down on him. The dermic power barrier formed by the immovable foundation seal was depleting at a visible speed. Ugh, Suzimo grunted, and his face turned pale. His strength seemed weak in the face of a Dharma-characteristic expert of the witch race. At that moment, he missed the creation Green Lotus dearly. If he had the creation Green Lotus in his hands, the skulls would not be able to get close to him no matter what ghostly methods they used. Kill. Suzimo reared his head and howled, releasing the sound domain's secret skill, Thunderclap Kill. Now that he had obtained the Great Void Spirit Refinement section, the might of the sound domain's secret skill had increased as well. The skulls that were initially gnawing on Suzimo shuddered. All of a sudden, a gigantic demon beast appeared beneath Suzimo. 4D. It stood upright like an immovable stone pillar. On its back was a gigantic shell with mysterious patterns etched on it. The demon beast had a pair of turtle and snake heads, and its eyes shone with a resplendent divine light as it reared its head and let out a long cry. The divine beast, the black tortoise, had descended. stepping on the turtle and snake. An extremely strong dermic power burst forth from Suzumo's body and repelled the 6 skulls on his body. He exerted strength once more and charged towards the blind old man. He could not win. He was no match in a head-on battle. Suzumo had already used all his trump cards even before he managed to break free of the skeleton curse. However, there was still no fear in his eyes. All he had to do was try his best to attract the blind old man's attention. The true killing move was not with him. At that moment, the fight between the two attracted everyone's attention. Even bystanders were in such a state, let alone the blind old man on the battlefield. Nobody noticed that the tragic cries of the void reversions of Dragon Tiger sect in the distance had suddenly stopped. Even if someone noticed it, they would not think too much about it. What did that mean? Looking at the charging Suzumo, the blind old man smirked coldly. To him, Suzumo was already an arrow at the end of its flight. It was a fool's dream if this lad wanted to get close to him. He had countless methods to stop this lad and prevent the distance between them from ever closing. Suddenly, for no reason, the blind old man's heart skipped a beat. The palpitation was extremely mild. If it was anyone else, they would not care at all. However, the loss of the blind old man's sight caused his senses and perception of the outside world to become extremely sharp. He suddenly thought of a possibility. Not good. The blind old man's expression changed starkly as a layer of dark green light enveloped his body, turning him blurry. Unknowingly, a black figure appeared behind him. It was like a ghost or a phantom. It was like a god of massacre that walked through the night. Night Spirit had returned. This was a tacit understanding that only Suzumo and Night Spirit understood. The two of them did not even send voice transmissions or exchange glances. That was because Night Spirit knew that Suzumo could not defeat the Dharma characteristic expert of the witch race alone. If Suzumo had not attracted the blind old man's attention, Night Spirit would not have been able to get close to him so easily. The two of them could only kill this Dharma characteristic Downlord of the witch race if they joined forces. The reason why he had Night Spirit chase after the void reversions of Dragon Tiger sect was to distract the blind old man. In reality, their plan had succeeded. However, the blind old man's reaction was fast enough. The moment Night Spirit appeared, he released the life-saving witchcraft of the witch race, Illusionary Curse. His figure was almost illusory and unpredictable, blurry without any edges at all. Night Spirit reached out and grabbed forward. Although he managed to scratch the blind old man, there was no blood at all. The blind old man was right in front of him, but Night Spirit's attack missed. Up till this point of the battle, every single time Night Spirit attacked, there would definitely be cultivators dying. However, he failed this time round. This was a rare opportunity. If they missed it, Suzumo and Night Spirit might not be able to kill the blind old man. There were many strange secret skills of the witch race. If the blind old man wanted to escape, Suzumo and Night Spirit might not be able to catch up to him given their capabilities. At that thought, a cold glint flashed through Night Spirit's eyes. Suddenly, a long, purple tail covered in scales appeared behind him. The tip of the long tail was extremely sharp and shone with a cold glint as it stabbed viciously in the direction of the blind old man. Flashes of blood appeared. Night Spirit's tail could break through illusions and pierce the blind old man's true body. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.